Tonight, we drift gently through millennia as we discover the greatest ever civilizations to have existed. In hushed tones, we'll explore ancient riverbanks, candlelit halls of learning, and starlit temples, weaving together historical wonder with a calm pace to ease your mind and cradle you into rest. As you settle in, allow your thoughts to soften like twilight sliding across a quiet field. Imagine the soft patter of footsteps on ancient streets, the glow of oil lamps in distant halls, the gentle turning of pages in a silent library. Each moment we'll share will be both enlightening and quietly soothing. So close your eyes if you wish, or let your gaze fall softly as we begin an unhurried journey. What can 100 generations teach us about the nature of human aspiration? What whispers linger in the ruins of ancient walls? And how can these echoes, heard in stillness, bring comfort and connection tonight? Here, curiosity and calm walk hand in hand. We invite you to drift, to dream, to absorb each moment of our passage through time. Welcome, dear listener. Our journey begins. Welcome to Drift Off to History, where we bring calm stories for curious minds. Chapter 1. The Sumerians. First cities and the birth of writing. Let us drift now, back to the very cradle of civilization, to a land where two great rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, gently cradle a fertile plain, where reeds sway softly in the warm wind, and the sky opens wide above an endless sea of golden earth. Here, in the southern reaches of Mesopotamia, over 6,000 years ago, a new way of life began to blossom, a quiet revolution in how people lived, worked, and remembered. This was the world of the Sumerians. Close your eyes if you wish, and picture it. Dawn breaking over the ancient city of Uruk, mud brick houses catching the first blush of sunlight, the distant sound of traders stirring in the marketplace, the gentle clink of pottery, and the rustle of palm fronds in the breeze. The air is thick with promise and with memory. The Sumerians were among the first people to settle in large permanent cities, not just villages or camps, but cities, with walls, temples, courts, and granaries, places where people gathered not just for survival, but for stories, rituals, learning, and song. It is here that human beings first learned to live in complex societies, sharing food, law, and language. Their cities had names that hummed softly through the centuries: Ur, Lagash, Eridu, Uruk, names that now sleep beneath desert sands, but once rang with laughter, music, and prayer. In these cities, life was shaped by the rhythm of the rivers. The Sumerians dug canals and irrigation channels to tame the floods and water their fields. They grew barley, kept goats and sheep, and brewed a thick, cloudy beer that was both food and festivity. They spun wool, pressed oils, and fashioned elegant tools from copper and stone. But their most extraordinary gift was a quiet one. It began not as poetry or story, but as a simple need to count: a sack of grain, a flock of sheep, a measure of silver. And so they began to make marks, careful impressions on small clay tablets. Over time, these marks grew more complex, more expressive. Eventually, they became the first written script humanity ever devised: cuneiform. Wedge-shaped symbols pressed into soft clay with a stylus made from reed. At first, these were just records, ledgers of trade, inventories of goods. But then came myths, hymns, epic tales of gods and heroes, laws, letters. The Sumerians turned memory into permanence. With cuneiform, they could preserve thought beyond the breath, beyond the day. Can you imagine the moment? A scribe hunched over a flickering oil lamp in a quiet chamber, pressing symbols into the damp clay, knowing he was capturing something eternal. Perhaps a prayer to Inanna, the goddess of love and war. Perhaps the story of Gilgamesh, the mighty king who sought immortality. Perhaps the birth record of a child, or a contract signed in trust. In this way, the Sumerians gave us something sacred, the ability to write, and through it, to reach across time. Their world was filled with wonder. Towering ziggurats rose from the city centers, massive step temples built of mud brick, reaching up to the sky like man-made mountains. Priests climbed these structures to offer prayers to the gods above, asking for rain, or health, or harmony. Each city had its own patron deity, Inanna, Enlil, Nanna, Utu. These were not distant gods, but close companions in daily life. The temple was not just a place of worship, but a center of economy, science, and healing. Temples housed granaries, libraries, and schools. They were the beating hearts of Sumerian cities. And then there were the stars. The Sumerians were the first known astronomers. They gazed up at the heavens with reverence, watching the dance of Venus, the steady rhythm of the moon, the great constellations sweeping across the night. They divided time into 60-minute hours and created a lunar calendar to track their seasons. They studied omens in the skies and recorded eclipses with meticulous care. To them, the cosmos was a kind of sacred clock, a divine script to be read and understood. What did they feel under those vast Mesopotamian skies? Did they sense, as we might, that they were part of something enormous and enduring, that their lives, etched in clay and echoed in ritual, might one day be remembered? We do remember. Their words still whisper from the tablets unearthed by modern archaeologists. Their cities, though ruined, still show their careful planning. Their myths, though aged, still stir something deep in the human heart. And so we pause here, in this land between rivers. We listen to the reeds rustling beside an ancient canal. We feel the warmth of baked clay under our fingertips. We imagine the quiet pride of a scribe setting down his stylus after recording the harvest or writing a poem to the stars. The Sumerians were the first to build this bridge across time, and though their voices come to us from the deep past, they arrive not as echoes, but as gentle guides, inviting us to remember how it all began. Rest here if you wish, breathe slowly, the rivers still flow, the stars still turn, and the story continues. Chapter 2: Ancient Egyptians, Eternal Stone and the River's Rhythm. Let us drift now, ever so slowly, along the banks of a mighty river. The water gleams beneath the moonlight, flowing northward as if time itself were gently drawn along by its current. This is the Nile, the life vein of one of history's most luminous civilizations. Here, in the warm embrace of northeastern Africa, beneath a vast canopy of stars, rose the eternal land of Kemet, the Black Land, the land we now call ancient Egypt. Close your eyes if you wish, and imagine the scene. Papyrus reeds swaying softly in the breeze, fishermen casting their nets as the sun begins to rise, the call of ibis birds in the morning air, golden light spilling across green fields where oxen plough the earth and farmers greet the day with quiet resolve. All around them, the rhythm of life is guided by the river's breath, the slow, faithful pulse of flood and ebb. It was this river that made Egypt possible. Without it, there would have been only desert, dry, vast, and silent. But with it, there was abundance, and from that abundance rose something extraordinary. The ancient Egyptians built not just cities and temples, but a vision of eternity. They watched the seasons and the skies, they honored the sun and the soil, and they imagined a world where life could stretch beyond death. To them, existence was a cycle, sunrise and sunset, flood and harvest, birth and renewal, and so they built, not for the moment, but for forever. Across the desert plains, the pyramids rose, massive, solemn, and serene. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built for the pharaoh Khufu, still stands with a quiet majesty that defies the centuries. Nearly 5,000 years old, it remains one of the most astonishing structures ever made by human hands. Can you picture it? Glowing golden in the light of dawn. Each stone placed with patient precision. Each angle aligned with the stars. A monument to permanence. A stairway to the heavens. But these were not mere tombs. They were doorways. Sacred passages for the soul's journey into the afterlife. The Egyptians believed in an intricate balance of forces, the Ka, the Ba, the shadow, the name, the heart. All had to be protected, honored, and preserved. Death was not an end, but a delicate crossing, a voyage by boat across celestial waters toward fields of eternal peace. To guide that journey, they left behind scrolls inscribed with sacred words, the Book of the Dead, written in flowing lines of hieroglyphics, elegant pictorial signs that told of judgment, protection, and transformation. These hieroglyphs, painted on tomb walls and carved into limestone, were more than language. They were art. A single symbol could carry layers of meaning: a feather, a reed, a coiled rope. To write was to weave the sacred into the everyday. It was an act of beauty and devotion. The gods were many, each a part of the great pattern: Ra, the sun god who sailed his fiery boat across the sky; Osiris, lord of the underworld, forever green with renewal; Isis, the loving mother and healer; Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe of divine knowledge; Bastet, the gentle cat goddess who watched over homes and dreams. To walk through an Egyptian temple was to step into a breathing story. Columns like papyrus stalks, ceilings painted with stars, incense curling in the air, sacred chants echoing through chambers of cool stone, priests moving silently in white linen robes, bearing offerings, lighting lamps. Everything slow, everything sacred. And then there was the city, Memphis, Thebes, Amarna, places alive with color and craft. Artists chiseled statues from granite and painted tomb scenes of daily life and divine journeys. Goldsmiths shaped delicate jewelry. Weavers spun linen from flax. There were festivals, feasts, markets, and moments of laughter, even under the shadow of eternity. The Egyptians loved music and poetry. They sang to the Nile, to the sun, to the gods. A favorite poem from long ago urges the listener to take joy in life. Put myrrh on your head, clothe yourself in fine linen, anoint yourself with oils from the rarest flowers. Follow your heart, and let not sorrow steal your days. Even in a culture so steeped in the afterlife, there was room for joy, for the softness of a summer night, the sweetness of ripe figs, the laughter of a child chasing her shadow on a stone courtyard. Over 3,000 years, dynasties rose and fell, from the builders of the pyramids to the warrior kings of the new kingdom, from Akhenaten's devotion to the sun disk to Cleopatra's final fateful days. Egypt endured. It adapted, it reimagined itself, but it never forgot its roots in the river, in the soil, in the stars. And now, as we rest here beside those ancient banks, we remember them. We feel the cool air drifting off the water. We imagine the gentle hush inside a tomb where time stands still and the painted walls still glow with meaning. We hear the rustle of papyrus scrolls, the soft chant of a priest, the hush of a temple court as the sun sets behind pillars tall and wide. The Egyptians understood something timeless, that to live with reverence is to live with beauty. That memory is sacred. That stone can hold a soul. And that, even in silence, we are never truly forgotten. So breathe deeply here. The pyramids rise like dreams from the sand. The river flows on, ever faithful, and our journey through time, like the sun's gentle arc, continues softly onward. Chapter 3. Indus Valley Civilization. Serenity in the grid. Let us now drift further east, where the monsoon winds brush softly over the plains of the Indian subcontinent, and the waters of the Indus River glide in slow harmony with the land. In the quiet dawn, birds begin to stir in the reeds. The distant hills stand like patient sentinels, and nestled among the sands and silts of long-forgotten time lies a civilization both ancient and astonishing, the Indus Valley Civilization. Close your eyes and picture it. An early morning in the city of Mohenjo-daro, nearly 4,000 years ago. The sun casts a warm glow over streets paved with baked brick, still damp from the night's cool air. A child chases a terracotta toy down a narrow alley. The hum of daily life is beginning to rise, gently, peacefully, as if every person knows their place in the quiet rhythm of the city. This was a world defined by order, calm, and quiet sophistication. The cities of the Indus Valley, Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, Dholavira, and others were among the most advanced of the ancient world. Their planning was deliberate, precise, and deeply human. Streets ran in straight lines, crossing one another at gentle right angles. Homes, made from sun-baked bricks, were built to align with the winds, catching breezes and filtering dust. Every detail seemed to whisper of care. Unlike the monumental temples of Egypt or the towering ziggurats of Mesopotamia, the architecture of the Indus Valley was modest in height but rich in meaning. Function and form walked hand in hand. Public baths, wells, reservoirs, and drainage systems spoke not of kings and conquest, but of community, of shared resources, of health, of harmony. At the heart of Mohenjo-daro stood the Great Bath, a large sunken pool lined with bricks and sealed with natural tar. It may have been used for ritual purification or simply for communal bathing. Either way, it offers us a window into the soul of this society, one that prized cleanliness, balance, and collective care. How extraordinary it is that thousands of years ago, people could build something so enduring, not just in stone, but in spirit. Unlike the civilizations of nearby Mesopotamia and Egypt, the Indus Valley people left behind no grand statues of kings, no palaces to announce dominion. There is little evidence of warfare, little sign of social extremes. Instead, what we find are humble homes, often with their own private wells and bathing areas, and workshops filled with pottery, beads, and tools. It suggests society not ruled by fear or ego, but perhaps by mutual respect and shared purpose. Their artistry too is quiet yet profound. Tiny carved seals made of steatite, soft, smooth stone, depict animals both real and mythical, humped bulls, tigers, elephants, and unicorn-like creatures. Each seal is inscribed with a script we have yet to fully decipher. The symbols remain, like dreams etched in stone, waiting to be read. What might they have said? Were they names, prayers, records of trade, soft poems carved into the day's clay? We do not yet know. But in their very mystery lies a kind of beauty, an invitation to wonder. These seals were often used in trade, suggesting that the Indus Valley was part of a vast, interconnected world. Goods from distant lands, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, shells from the Arabian Sea, and copper from nearby mines, found their way into workshops and marketplaces. Merchants travelled by river and road, perhaps guided by stars, their goods packed with care and hope. There is something deeply comforting in the idea of this civilization, a people who, without kings or empires, without conquest or ceremony, simply built, quietly, brilliantly, a way of life that valued peace, cleanliness, and connection. They were not loud. They did not seek the heavens with pyramids or columns. But in their silence, in their gentle designs, they left behind a whisper of something extraordinary. We imagine now the quiet rustle of cotton garments, the scent of earth after rain, the sparkle of carnelian beads in a jeweler's hand, the soft scrape of a potter's wheel turning in rhythm with the breath of the land. And yet, like so many great stories, this one fades too soon. Around 1900 BCE, the cities began to wane, the drains clogged, the wells dried, the houses emptied. Some say it was climate change, a shift in the monsoon patterns. Others suspect the river changed course, or earthquakes shook the region. There is no great war, no epic collapse, just a soft, slow decline, like a song fading into silence. But the legacy lingers, in the bricks, in the beads, in the serene geometry of their cities, and perhaps in the values they held: dignity in daily life, harmony with nature, and care for the community. As we leave the Indus Valley now, let us take with us its quiet strength. We float once more above the grid-like streets, past the Great Bath, past the homes and shops and wells. We listen to the silence of a civilization that speaks not in thunder or triumph, but in stillness. A civilization that teaches us that greatness does not always roar. Sometimes it simply endures. So rest now if you wish. Let the rhythm of the river soothe your breath. Let the soft geometry of ancient streets ease your thoughts. And let the wisdom of a peaceful people, long vanished but never lost, guide you gently into deeper dreams. Chapter 4. Minoans, Palaces of Light and Labyrinth. Let us journey now to a sun-drenched island cradled by the sapphire waves of the Aegean Sea, to Crete, a place where light dances across whitewashed walls and the scent of wild thyme floats on warm Mediterranean air. Long ago, in this golden cradle of sea and sky, flourished a civilization filled with grace, beauty, and quiet mystery, the Minoans. Close your eyes and picture it, a morning breeze drifting in from the sea, stirring curtains dyed in crimson and gold. In the palace courtyard, doves flutter in olive trees, and water trickles from carved stone fountains. Beyond the palace walls, terraced farms bask in the sun. The sea shimmers like a sheet of silvered silk, and somewhere in the distance, a flute begins to play. This was the Minoan world, elegant, vibrant, and unlike any other. Emerging around 3000 BCE and reaching its height between 2000 and 1400 BCE, the Minoans were among the earliest advanced civilizations in Europe. Yet theirs was not a kingdom of conquest or war, but one of art, trade, and ceremony. They left behind no great battles, no towering statues of warrior kings, but instead frescoes filled with color, harmony, and motion. At the heart of Minoan life were the great palaces, and none more famous than Knossos. But these were not palaces in the traditional sense. They were not fortresses, nor homes for kings alone. Rather, they were sprawling open-air complexes of courtyards, workshops, storerooms, and shrines. A maze of rooms connected by staircases, light wells, and porticos, bright with murals and alive with activity. Step quietly into Knossos now. Let your feet trace the polished floors. Let your hands drift along the painted walls, where dolphins leap through deep blue waves, and dancers whirl in celebration beneath garlands of flowers. The frescoes pulse with movement. Women with bare shoulders and flounced skirts, young athletes leaping over bulls in daring arcs of motion. The Minoans celebrated life with joy and grace. Their art reveals a society that cherished the natural world, that found wonder in the sea, in animals, in the human form. Unlike many other ancient cultures, women appear often in Minoan art, not just in domestic roles, but as priestesses, dancers, and central figures in ceremony. Power here may have flowed more evenly, more gently, and always there was the sea. The Minoans were master sailors. Their ships cut smoothly across the Aegean and beyond, connecting Crete to Egypt, the Levant, and the Cycladic Islands. They traded olive oil, wine, wool, and the deep red mineral known as cinnabar. In return, they welcomed ideas, goods, and stories, weaving the world into their own island tapestry. In the shadow of myth, we find the story of the labyrinth, a twisting maze beneath Knossos, where the Minotaur was said to dwell. Was this inspired by the palace itself, with its winding halls and hidden chambers, or by rituals long forgotten, performed in the twilight of sacred rooms? The truth eludes us, but the mystery remains. Gentle, alluring, timeless. Though the Minoans left no known written history as we understand it, they did leave behind two forms of script. Linear A, still undeciphered, and later Linear B, an early form of Greek. These symbols were etched on clay tablets, quietly cataloguing the daily rhythm of palace life. Offerings to the gods, inventories of grain and oil, the names of craftsmen and scribes. But language is not the only way to speak across time. In every carved seal, in every painted dolphin, in every cup of burnished pottery, the Minoans speak to us. They tell of balance, of elegance, of a society that found its greatness not in domination, but in expression. And then it faded. Around 1450 BCE, many Minoan palaces were destroyed, some by fire, some perhaps by earthquake. The nearby volcanic eruption of Thera on the island now known as Santorini may have shaken the region with terrifying force, sending waves across the sea and ash across the sky. The Minoans never fully recovered. Eventually, Crete came under the influence of the Mycenaeans from mainland Greece. The palaces fell silent, the paint faded, the flute songs were stilled, but the spirit of the Minoans lingers, not in ruins alone, but in the way we still long for beauty, balance, and artful peace. So let us pause here, in a palace of light and labyrinth. Let us sit beside a cool fountain, under painted beams, with the sea breeze gently combing the air. Let us breathe in the echoes of a civilization that once danced with dolphins and dreamed in colour. Rest now, if you wish. The island is still, the waves are soft, and the path ahead winds gently into deeper time. Chapter 5. Babylonians, Laws, Stars, and the Pulse of Time. We drift now to the heart of Mesopotamia once more, where mighty rivers still murmur through ancient soil, and the sky at night opens like a velvet scroll embroidered with stars. Here, beside the Euphrates, rose one of the most luminous civilizations of the ancient world, Babylon. Close your eyes if you wish, and imagine the evening light falling softly over tall, sun-baked walls. The river shimmers with gold. Palm trees rustle in the warm breeze. In the distance, the towers of a great city glow against the twilight, their ziggurats climbing slowly toward the heavens. This was Babylon, a city of law and light, of calculation and cosmic wonder, a city where order was cherished, and where the rhythms of time itself were carefully observed, measured, and revered. The Babylonians inherited the legacies of Sumer and Akkad, and from their capital they refined the art of civilization. Their greatest king, Hammurabi, ruled around 1750 BCE and is remembered for something truly revolutionary: a written code of laws. Etched into a tall black stone stele for all to see, the Code of Hammurabi offered structure, clarity, and above all, visibility. This was not law whispered in palace halls, but law cast in stone for citizen and servant alike. If a builder constructs a house that collapses, if a merchant breaks his promise, if a dispute arises between neighbors, each scenario was addressed with measured response. Justice, while not always gentle, was grounded in the idea that society must rest on rules, and with rules came a sense of fairness, of balance. The law gave shape to the flow of daily life, just as the levees shaped the floodwaters of the Euphrates. But the Babylonians were not only lawmakers, they were watchers of the stars. On their high ziggurats, they observed the night sky with patient devotion. They recorded the movements of Venus, the moon, and the planets. They divided the sky into constellations, giving names to the heavens, and they did not only gaze, they calculated. They developed systems to predict eclipses and track celestial cycles. They created detailed star charts and may have been the first to divide the hour into 60 minutes and the circle into 360 degrees, mathematical echoes that still shape our world today. There is something deeply poetic about this, that a civilization so grounded in law also looked upward, beyond itself, that in the same breath they could study a contract and the cosmos. Their sense of time was both legal and lunar, both practical and profound. Imagine a Babylonian scholar seated in a quiet room lit by a flickering oil lamp, bent over a clay tablet, one moment recording barley deliveries, the next sketching the rising of the moon. The stylus presses gently into wet clay. The night deepens. The stars outside remain, ancient and still. Their writing, cuneiform, continued to evolve here. Thousands of tablets have been found, buried in archives, filled with trade records, prayers, legal decrees, epics, and dreams. Among them, we find fragments of the Enuma Elish, a great creation myth that begins with the swirling of waters, the birth of gods, the forging of order from chaos. When on high the heavens had not been named, it begins, like a whisper from the oldest memory of humanity. In their myths and rituals, the Babylonians found ways to make sense of life's questions. What is our place in the cosmos? What do the stars say of tomorrow? How can a people thrive, not through strength alone, but through structure, wisdom, and reflection? Their cities were grand. Babylon itself, under Nebuchadnezzar the 2nd centuries later, became a marvel of the world, with soaring gates, grand temples, and the legendary hanging gardens, whose very existence, though debated, still inspires a kind of enchanted longing. Gardens raised high in the sky, filled with greenery, waterfalls, and shade, a cool oasis above the desert heat, and through it all, the river flowed. The Babylonians built canals and reservoirs, carefully guiding water through a hot and thirsty land. Farmers planted dates, barley, onions, and herbs. Artisans crafted jewelry from lapis and gold, carved statues from alabaster, and painted their walls with radiant blue glazed tiles. Trade brought spices, incense, and rare woods from distant shores. Though their power rose and fell, Babylon remained a symbol, a city of wonder, of rule, and of ritual. When the Assyrians conquered her, she rebuilt. When the Persians arrived, she adapted. She endured, reshaped by time, remembered by many names. And now, as we sit quietly at her edge, beneath a sky that the Babylonians once measured so carefully, we too become watchers of time. We trace their legacy in our clocks, our calendars, our mathematics, and even in the deep structure of our laws. And we feel a quiet awe for a people who understood that true greatness is not found in might alone, but in the gentle shaping of time, justice, and wonder. Let the stars wheel above you in silence. Let the cool clay of ancient tablets calm your mind, and let the laws and lights of Babylon lull you into dreams of soft order and infinite sky. Chapter 6. Hittites, Bronze and Balance in the Highlands. Let us drift now into the heart of Anatolia, a land of rolling hills, high plateaus, and winds that whisper through ancient pine. The sun rests low on the horizon, casting long shadows across stone citadels and quiet valleys. This is the world of the Hittites, an empire shaped by mountain stone and tempered by bronze. Close your eyes, if you wish, and imagine the stronghold of Hattusa. Its walls rise proudly from the rocky earth, massive gates crowned with lion sculptures and fortified by ancient ambition. The air smells of cedar and iron. From within the walls, the clang of metal rings softly, echoing against the hills. Bronze tools, bronze weapons, bronze dreams forged in the firelight of dawn. The Hittites emerged around 1600 BCE, carving a kingdom into the rugged highlands of modern-day Turkey. Here, they built not just fortresses and roads, but a complex society founded on treaties, diplomacy, and a curious kind of restraint. In a world often ruled by conquest and collapse, the Hittites stood out for their balance, fierce in war, but clever in peace. Their language, Hittite, is the oldest known Indo-European tongue ever written, preserved on clay tablets in an adapted form of cuneiform. And oh, how they wrote. Thousands of tablets have been unearthed from the ruins of their capital, legal codes, royal decrees, religious hymns, and international correspondence. The Hittites were not just warriors, but record keepers and storytellers. Among their most extraordinary contributions is something both subtle and powerful: the treaty. In a world where might often decided right, the Hittites pioneered diplomatic agreements between equals and rivals alike. Their most famous, the Treaty of Kadesh, was signed with the Egyptians around 1259 BCE after a great battle in Syria. It is one of the earliest surviving peace accords in human history. Two mighty powers, both bruised, deciding not to fight further, but to speak, to write, to agree. Is that not a kind of wisdom? Their kings bore titles like Great King or My Son, but their rule was checked by councils and advisors. Even queens held considerable power, their names and seals preserved with dignity alongside those of kings. And the gods were everywhere. The Hittites worshipped a vast pantheon drawn from their own traditions and those of their neighbours. Weather gods and sun goddesses, river spirits and divine bulls. In stone sanctuaries carved into cliffs, they held ceremonies amid statues of deities arranged in long processions. One for each aspect of the world, as if the divine was woven into the very fabric of daily life. At Yazilikaya, near their capital, the sacred figures still stand. Carved in stone, they march in silence through time, gods of thunder, queens of the underworld, spirits of air and storm. Even now, their faces remain serene, powerful, timeless. The Hittites were skilled metallurgists. Their bronze, a blend of copper and tin, gave rise to tools, weapons, and ornaments of great precision. They crafted chariots, swift and light, with spoked wheels and balanced frames, machines of both speed and symmetry. In battle, they moved like wind across the plain. Yet their achievements went beyond the forge. Their legal codes showed care for the rights of the accused. Their agricultural texts recorded the cycles of crops and livestock. Their myths echoed through generations, tales of the storm god, of Iluyanka, the serpent, of divine struggle and renewal. These stories carried not just wonder, but a gentle moral clarity that chaos can be tamed, that justice can prevail. And then, slowly, the silence came. By the 12th century BCE, the Hittite Empire had vanished from history. Its cities fell. Its records were buried. For centuries, no one knew it had ever existed. Its name faded from memory, but the tablets waited. In the 20th century, archaeologists uncovered the ruins of Hattusa, its gates, its archives, its shrines. The Hittites returned to us, not as legend, but as memory restored. Their words, once dried into fragile clay, were translated and read anew. They had never been lost, only sleeping. So we pause now among their stones. We walk slowly through a sunlit gate carved with lions. We breathe in the dry air of the highlands and hear the faint echo of hammer on bronze. We read a peace treaty soft with time, and we wonder how such wisdom came to be. High on the windswept plateaus of Anatolia, the Hittites teach us that power can be quiet, that courage may take the form of a signature, not a sword, and that even in the hills, far from great rivers and empires, humanity can rise, not just to survive, but to govern, to build, to remember. Rest here, if you wish. The highlands are still, the stones are warm, and the long road of history winds on, ever so gently. Chapter 7. Shang Dynasty, Bronze Bells and Oracle Bones. Now, let us drift eastward, to a land where mists cling gently to green hills, where rivers wander like ribbons of silk across ancient earth, and where a new chapter of civilization was being written in metal, ritual, and whispered prophecy. This is ancient China, and we arrive now in the time of the Shang Dynasty, a world of bronze and bone, of ancestral reverence and sacred sound, a world that flickers like a lantern behind gauze, soft with memory yet shining with meaning. The Shang ruled from around 1600 to 1046 BCE. Their cities rose near the banks of the Yellow River, the cradle of Chinese civilization, its waters flowing slow and heavy, winding through fertile plains. Here, amid mulberry trees and fields of millet, the Shang built their palaces and temples, their foundries and shrines. Close your eyes if you wish, and picture the capital of Yin as dawn breaks. The smell of charcoal wafts from the bronze workshops, where molten metal glows like captured sunlight. In another courtyard, a ritual unfolds. Robed figures chanting softly, drums beating low, incense drifting upward like prayers into the pale sky. This is a place where heaven and earth are connected, through ritual, sound, and symbol. The Shang people were among the earliest known users of bronze on a grand scale. They did not merely shape tools or weapons. They crafted ceremonial vessels, each one an artwork, covered in swirling patterns, mask-like motifs, and the mysterious forms of dragons, tigers, and phoenixes. These vessels were used in rites of offering, wine poured to the ancestors, grain burned to honor the spirits. Every curve, every engraving carried meaning. The Teotihuacan, a strange, symmetrical face that adorns many of these vessels, still puzzles scholars. Was it a monster, a guardian, a mask between worlds? Whatever it was, it speaks now as it did then, in silence but with presence. The Shang believed deeply in the power of their ancestors. To them, the dead were not gone, but watching, guiding, listening, and occasionally needing to be consulted. And so, the Shang developed one of humanity's earliest known methods of divination, the oracle bone. The Shang believed deeply in the power of their ancestors. To them, the dead were not gone, but watching, guiding, listening, and occasionally needing to be consulted. And so, the Shang developed one of humanity's earliest known methods of divination, the oracle bone. Imagine, in the hush of a sacred chamber, a Shang priest holding a shoulder blade of an ox or the flat underside of a turtle shell. Questions are inscribed on the bone. Will the king's son recover from illness? Will it rain tomorrow? Should we wage war on the neighboring state? The bone is then heated until it cracks, and the priest reads the lines like a map of divine intention. The cracks are recorded, the answers archived. Thousands of these bones have been unearthed, many bearing not just prophecy, but the very earliest known Chinese writing. Tiny characters, etched by careful hands, names, dates, hopes, fears. These early pictographs evolved into the Chinese script still used today, a direct thread of Incan intention, stretching over 3,000 years. The Shang kings ruled with the mandate of heaven, a concept that would echo through Chinese history for millennia. They were seen as intermediaries between the mortal world and the divine, responsible for maintaining harmony between earth and sky. To lose that harmony through disaster, rebellion, or failure was to lose the right to rule. Yet the Shang were more than priests and kings. Their society was rich with craftsmen, warriors, and farmers. Women could hold power too, and one of the most remarkable figures of the dynasty was Fu Hao, a military general, high priestess, and consort to King Wu Ding. Her tomb, discovered untouched, revealed not only treasures of jade, bone, and bronze, but the echoes of a life lived boldly. In her resting place were weapons and vessels, symbols of both power and piety, proof that even in this early age, women could shape the course of dynasties. The Shang's connection to music was also profound. Archaeologists have found bronze bells and chimes, tuned to different notes, laid carefully in tombs and ritual halls. These instruments weren't just for celebration. They were believed to speak to the heavens, to call forth order and peace. Can you hear them now? A low chime in the cool morning air, a slow rhythm to mark the season, a melody played not for crowds, but for ancestors, and the sky itself. And then, as all things must, the Shang gave way to time. Around 1046 BCE, the Zhou rose to power, claiming the heavens had withdrawn their blessing from the Shang kings. The dynasty fell, its cities faded, and its temples crumbled, but the ideas they nurtured, ancestor veneration, divine authority, the unity of ritual and rule, would flow like quiet streams into the centuries that followed. And now, we sit in the silence left behind, a cracked bone bearing a question from 3,000 years ago, a bronze vessel still gleaming with careful lines, a bell that once called the stars to listen. The Shang show us that the past is not only built in stone and war, but in music, memory, and mystery, that to honor what came before is to understand who we are and who we might become. So rest now, if you wish. The river drifts on, slow and golden. The bells are still. The oracle bones sleep once more beneath the earth, but their stories remain soft as whispers. And our journey through time continues. Chapter 8. Assyrians, Stone Lions and Silent Libraries. Let us drift now through the soft sands of northern Mesopotamia, to a place where empire once rose like thunder, but whose legacy lingers in stone and silence. This is the land of the Assyrians, a people who carved their power into walls and words, who built empires and libraries, who ruled with iron and wrote with ink. The winds of the Tigris River whisper through ancient ruins. Dust swirls gently around crumbled gates, and from beneath the earth, carved eyes still watch us, solemn, proud, and patient. Close your eyes if you wish, and imagine the ancient city of Nineveh in its golden age. Towering palaces rise behind high walls, Courtyards bloom with flowers and stone fountains. Winged creatures with human faces and lion bodies guard the doorways, the Lamassu, sentinels of strength and wisdom. The Assyrians were once nomadic herders, wandering the grassy plains of the north, but by the 2nd millennium BCE, they had become one of the most formidable empires the world had ever known. Fierce, efficient, and unrelenting, yet also deeply literate, spiritual, and curious. They ruled from cities like Ashur, Nimrud, and Nineveh, building massive complexes of ziggurats, temples, and palaces. Their walls were etched with scenes of conquest, kings riding in chariots, enemies kneeling in surrender, lions hunted in ritual display. These images, though often stark, were not just records of might. They were meditations on order, kingship, and divine duty. The Assyrian king was more than a ruler. He was chosen by the gods, tasked with defending the world from chaos. To conquer was to preserve divine balance, a harsh truth, yet one deeply believed. But beyond the sword, there was also the stylus. Among the Assyrians' most enduring gifts to history is their devotion to the written word. At Nineveh, within the grand palace of Ashurbanipal, they built something remarkable, the world's first known systematic library. Thousands upon thousands of clay tablets, each inscribed with careful cuneiform, lined the shelves. Myths, medical texts, omens, mathematics, dictionaries, legal codes, rituals, royal correspondence, all preserved, catalogued, and revered. In the cool rooms of this great library, knowledge was gathered not just to impress, but to understand. It was here that the Epic of Gilgamesh was copied and preserved, that sweeping tale of kingship, friendship, and the search for eternal life. A story born in Sumer, passed through generations, and carefully archived by Assyrian hands. Imagine a scribe, seated cross-legged on the floor, shaping each mark with steady focus. Outside, the bustle of empire continues. Soldiers training, merchants bartering, priests chanting. But within the library there is quiet. Only the soft scratch of the stylus, only the breath of thought. The Assyrians were also astronomers. Like their Babylonian cousins, they watched the stars, recorded eclipses, and tracked the rhythms of time. Their scholars believed the heavens could speak of things to come, that every flicker in the sky was a whisper from the divine, and they listened. They also engineered remarkable systems of irrigation and transport, carving canals through arid lands, linking cities by paved roads. They used relay posts to carry messages swiftly across the empire, a precursor to the postal system. They were planners as much as warriors, and their cities pulsed with administrative precision. Yet, like all empires, the Assyrians were not eternal. By the late 7th century BCE, their vast dominion had grown thin. The weight of rebellion, exhaustion, and ambition from without began to crack the foundation. Babylon and allied forces rose up. In 612 BCE, Nineveh fell. Its palaces burned, its libraries buried in ash, and so the Lamassu, those majestic guardians, fell silent. The stone lions watched as the empire crumbled, and the once mighty Assyria vanished, seemingly into myth. But not forever. Thousands of years later, archaeologists uncovered the shattered gates of Nineveh, the fragments of sculpture, and, miraculously, the baked clay tablets of the great library. What had burned had not been lost. The words preserved by fire and earth began to speak again. And today, the voice of Assyria still reaches us, not in the roar of armies, but in the soft, careful lines pressed into clay, in the shape of a Lamassu's wing, in the lines of Gilgamesh's lament, in the wisdom stored beneath ash. Let us sit now among their ruins. let us rest at the base of a fallen column, beside the paw of a great stone lion. Let the wind carry the faint scent of history. Let the silence of the library return, not empty, but full of memory. The Assyrians teach us that even those who burn brightly and briefly can leave a long shadow, not of destruction, but of intellect, artistry, and enduring ambition. So breathe in now, slowly. The city may sleep, but its words still whisper. The empire may fall, but its dreams remain. Chapter 9. Mycenaeans, echoes of Homer and the hero's hearth. Now we drift again toward the sea, to a land where jagged hills rise over winding olive groves and quiet pastures, where morning mist curls through valleys once filled with song and firelight. This is the realm of the Mycenaeans, an ancient people who shaped the early Greek world and inspired tales that would echo through millennia. Their world is half history, half myth, a twilight realm of memory, where the lines between legend and life grow soft and golden. The Mycenaeans emerged around 1600 BCE on the mainland of Greece, building powerful city-states on high rocky outcrops. Their citadels stood like crowns above the plains, Mycenae, Pylos, Tiryns, each ruled by a one-axe, a king surrounded by nobles, warriors, artisans, and scribes. They built walls so massive that later Greeks would say they were crafted by giants. Cyclopean, they called them, with stones so large they seemed to defy the efforts of human hands. Great gates, thrones, and storerooms filled with offerings were found within, but perhaps nothing speaks more softly to us than the quiet flicker of a hearth at the heart of the palace. It was there, in the Megaron, the central hall, that flame and story intertwined. These were people of ceremony, hierarchy, and precision. They wrote in a script we call Linear B, the earliest known form of Greek, etched into clay tablets that recorded inventories of oil, grain, textiles, and livestock. Their words were not for poetry, but for order, for tracking what was given to the gods, what was owed to the palace, what was needed for the seasons to come. And yet, even in these lists and ledgers, we hear their presence, a world of people who believed in structure, in reverence, and in the careful tending of tradition. The Mycenaeans were also traders and warriors. Their ships sailed far beyond their rocky shores, connecting them to the Minoans, the Egyptians, the Hittites, and the lands of the eastern Mediterranean. They exported olive oil, wine, and pottery, and in return received bronze, gold, glass, and exotic dyes. Their world was a tapestry woven across the sea, a world where goods, ideas, and stories drifted from port to port like pollen on the wind. And in that wind, perhaps, came the first whispers of war and legend. Whether real or imagined, one tale rose above the rest, the story of the Trojan War. Around the 13th century, BCE, some say the Mycenaeans sailed east to wage war across the Aegean. When the poet Homer composed his epic centuries later, he painted them as kings of passion and pride. Agamemnon, Achilles, Odysseus, heroes of golden armor and burning ships, of grief, rage, and the long road home. Perhaps there was truth beneath the poetry. Archaeological evidence shows that a conflict of some kind may have occurred, but whether or not the siege of Troy happened exactly as sung, the Mycenaeans gave the world something eternal, the idea of the hero's journey, born not in strength alone, but in struggle, longing, and fate. Their tombs speak to this yearning for permanence. Within great beehive-shaped chambers, tholoi, the Mycenaean dead were laid to rest with golden masks, bronze swords, delicate jewelry, and painted pottery. The most famous of these, once believed to be the mask of Agamemnon, gazes upward in silence, its face serene, its eyes gently closed, as if still dreaming of past glory. These burials were not simple farewells, but offerings to time itself, carved in gold and stone. But like all early powers, the Mycenaean world was not to last. Around 1100 BCE, their palaces were abandoned, their writing forgotten. Whether by invasion, disaster, or gradual decline, their society faded into shadow. A Greek Dark Age followed, a time of quiet, of lost knowledge, of oral memory, and yet, through it all, their stories survived, not in tablets or tombs, but in song. Generations of bards carried the tales of kings and kin, of wrath and return, until writing returned once more, and those stories became the Iliad and the Odyssey. Even today, the ruins of Mycenae still hum with presence. The Lion Gate, with its proud stone beasts, still stands beneath the open sky. The graves lie deep beneath the earth, still holding the treasures of a vanished people. And the hills that once watched over firelit palaces now glow in quiet morning light, just as they did 3,000 years ago. To walk there is to step into memory. The Mycenaeans remind us that even when words are lost, meaning endures. That myth is not the opposite of truth, but another way of holding it, in rhythm, in symbol, in story. They gave us not just ruins, but archetypes, not just walls, but echoes. So rest now, if you wish. Let the last embers of the hero's hearth warm your thoughts. Let the names of ancient kings drift gently through your mind, not as warriors shouting in war, but as quiet voices sailing across the centuries, calling us to remember. The journey continues, soft as a lullaby, deeper into the past. Chapter 10: Olmecs, Giants of Stone in a Verdant Land. Now we drift far across oceans and time, into the lush green cradle of Mesoamerica, where jungle vines twist through ancient trees, and warm rain falls gently onto the leaves like whispers from another age. Here, nestled between rivers and rising forests, lived the Olmecs, one of the earliest and most mysterious civilizations of the Americas. Often called the mother culture of Mesoamerica, the Olmecs emerged around 1500 BCE, flourishing for nearly a millennium in what is now southern Mexico. And though they left behind no written history that we can fully understand, their presence lingers in stone, in colossal faces carved from volcanic rock, watching still and silent over the earth they once called home. Picture it now, if you wish, a clearing in the jungle, still steaming after rainfall. Birds trill softly from the canopy. In the center of the clearing stands a head, vast, unyielding, and human. Each line is carved with care, thick lips, wide nose, deep eyes gazing outward with unknowable calm. These heads, some as tall as a person and weighing many tons, are among the most iconic artifacts of the ancient world. How they were moved and shaped remains a mystery. Carved from basalt, found miles away, transported without the wheel, and arranged with ceremonial purpose. They speak of both technological achievement and spiritual depth. But the Olmecs were not just stone carvers. They were builders of cities like San Lorenzo, La Venta, and Tres Zapotes. Settlements aligned to the stars, organized around plazas, temples, and raised platforms. Their cities pulsed with ceremony and trade, their marketplaces rich with obsidian, jade, cacao, rubber, and feathers. Farmers tended maize, beans, squash, and sweet potatoes in the surrounding land, while craftsmen sculpted masks, figurines, and ornaments from precious greenstone. Their society was sophisticated, symbolic, and deeply attuned to the rhythms of earth and sky. The Olmec worldview blended nature and spirit so seamlessly that the two became one. Jaguars, serpents, crocodiles, and eagles were more than animals. They were symbols, deities, ancestors. Many Olmec sculptures seem to depict beings that are part human, part feline, wide-mouthed, almond-eyed, crouched in ritual pose. With these shamans in transformation, gods of the underworld, mythic ancestors guarding the thresholds between worlds. We may never fully know, but their art draws us inward, inviting reflection and reverence. The Olmecs also laid the foundations of Mesoamerican religion and culture. They likely invented or refined the sacred calendar, a system of cycles that counted both ritual time and solar time, based on the interplay of 260 and 365 days. These calendars would echo across centuries through the Maya, the Zapotecs, and the Aztecs. They may have developed one of the earliest writing systems in the Americas, although we have not yet unlocked its secrets. And they almost certainly played the first versions of the Mesoamerican ball game, a ritual sport that combined athleticism, mythology, and cosmic symbolism. To the Olmecs, the human and divine were never separate. A ruler might be a priest, a shaman, or the living embodiment of a god. Ritual bloodletting, offerings to the earth, and symbolic burials were ways of keeping the cosmos in balance. Life was not only about survival, it was about sacred participation. The sky was a story, the jungle was alive, and to live well was to honor both. And then, in time, the Olmecs faded. By around 400 BCE, their great cities were abandoned. Whether through environmental shifts, migration, internal collapse, or transformation into something new, the civilization grew quiet, but its echoes did not disappear. The civilizations that followed, the Maya, the Mixtec, the Aztec, all inherited and reinterpreted Olmec ideas. Their influence runs like a deep root beneath the surface of Mesoamerican history. Today, their stone heads still stand, patient, powerful, and proud. Some lie buried beneath earth and moss. Others have been raised again, displayed in museums or temples, returned to the light. Their faces do not speak in words, but in presence. Still, strong, and full of meaning. They watch and we remember. So rest now, if you wish. The jungle is quiet. The leaves sway gently overhead. The stone is warm with the memory of hands that shaped it. In this green and sacred land, time slows to a hush. The voices of the Olmecs remain, not loud, but steady. And the journey continues, deeper into the dream of history. Chapter 11, Zhou Dynasty, Harmony and Heaven's Mandate. Let us now journey east again, to the soft valleys and winding rivers of ancient China, a land of misty mornings, bamboo groves, and quiet contemplation. Here, the sky opens wide and still, and the soil remembers the weight of centuries. It is in this timeless land that the Zhou Dynasty emerged, a dynasty that would not only rule longer than any other in Chinese history, but also give birth to a vision of the world built upon harmony, order, and the will of heaven. The Zhou came to power around 1046 BCE after the fall of the Shang. They did not merely conquer, they redefined what it meant to rule. To them, kingship was not simply taken, it was granted by the heavens themselves. This idea would become central to Chinese thought for over 2,000 years, the mandate of heaven. It taught that rulers must govern with virtue and care, or they would lose the divine blessing. In this way, leadership was both sacred and conditional. If a king became cruel or incompetent, if floods or famines struck the land, it was seen not only as a misfortune, but as a sign that heaven had turned its face. Close your eyes, if you wish, and imagine the early Zhou court. The king sits beneath a canopy of silk, listening to his advisors in a hall scented with incense and polished wood. Outside, Bells chime softly in the breeze, and court musicians play slow, balanced melodies to honor the seasons and spirits. This was a world where ceremony held great power, where each movement, each word, was steeped in meaning. The Zhou rulers organized their vast territory through a feudal system, appointing regional lords to govern distant lands in the name of the king. Over time, these local rulers grew stronger, and the once unified realm began to fracture. But while central control waned, the intellectual and cultural heart of China began to beat with greater strength. During the later Eastern Zhou period, a time also known as the Spring and Autumn and Warring States eras, the land was divided and often at war. And yet, out of this turbulence arose some of the most profound thinkers in human history. It was during this time that Confucius walked the dusty roads of the kingdom, teaching ethics, respect, and the importance of filial piety. His teachings, rooted in compassion, discipline, and social harmony, would come to guide China's heart for generations. Alongside Confucianism bloomed Taoism, a philosophy that sought not order through rules, but peace through flow, the quiet path of least resistance. Where Confucianism looked outward to society, Taoism looked inward to nature. Its sages spoke of the Tao, the way of the universe, which moved like water, soft, patient, and irresistible. Between these two great ways of thinking, the Zhou era offered a kind of spiritual dialogue, a gentle tug of war between structure and surrender. And then there was the music. The Zhou believed that music reflected the moral state of a society. Bells, flutes, and stringed instruments were tuned not just to sound pleasant, but to create emotional balance, to echo the harmony of heaven and earth. In Zhou ritual, music was not performance. It was prayer, alignment, and grace. Archaeologists have unearthed elegant bronze bells, arranged by tone and size, used in ceremonial performances that honored ancestors and soothed the cosmos itself. The Zhou were also skilled in bronze, casting, and jade carving. Their vessels bore inscriptions to ancestors. Their ornaments were symbols of rank and virtue. In the homes of nobles and scholars, scrolls and bamboo slips carried early texts on governance, astronomy, ethics, and medicine. The written word was cherished, not just as record, but as refinement, a brushstroke of thought made permanent. And yet, the Zhou dynasty too would fragment. As the centuries passed, regional warlords grew ever more ambitious. Battles broke out, alliances shifted, and the central court in Luoyang lost its power. But this slow dissolution did not erase their legacy. Instead, it helped define the soul of China. The idea that leadership must be earned and maintained through just behavior, that human beings could refine themselves through learning and ritual, that the rhythms of nature could teach us peace. All of this came from the Zhou. So let us rest here a moment in the soft light of an ancient courtyard. We sit beneath a flowering plum tree. A breeze rustles through hanging silk banners. Somewhere nearby, a zither begins to play, a few gentle notes, rising like breath. The air smells of earth, paper, and jasmine. The teachings of the sages echo faintly in the wind, not as doctrine, but as kindness. Quiet reminders that harmony, even in chaos, is always possible. Rest now, if you wish. The stars above are unchanged, the bells are silent, but their tones still ring through history. And the journey, ever calm and unhurried, carries us onward into the next dream of time. Chapter 12. Ancient Israel, Hebrews, Sacred Stories, and a Covenant with Time. Now we drift to a land of sun-warmed hills and quiet olive groves, where the wind moves gently across stone terraces, and the voices of shepherds echo faintly in the valleys. This is the land of ancient Israel, a place of covenant and story, of desert journey and whispered prayer. Here, amidst rocky paths and fig trees, a small people shaped a faith that would stretch far beyond its homeland, enduring through time not by empire or conquest, but through memory, words, and beliefs. The Hebrews, also known as the ancient Israelites, were not builders of towering cities or vast armies. Their strength was quieter. It was in the scroll, the song, the story passed from mouth to mouth and heart to heart. Emerging in the late 2nd millennium BCE, their story begins with wanderers, with Abraham leaving the city of Ur, with his descendants moving through the lands of Canaan, Egypt, and the Sinai wilderness. Their identity was formed not by borders, but by a journey, a sacred migration, both literal and spiritual, guided by a deep and evolving relationship with the divine. Close your eyes if you wish, and imagine a fire glowing beneath desert stars. A family sits in a circle, the sky vast and silent above them. A grandfather speaks, reciting from memory the story of creation, of Adam and Eve, of Noah's Ark, and the rainbow's promise. These tales are not simply for comfort. They are threads of identity, woven into each child's heart like a quiet covenant. In time, these stories would be gathered into one of the most influential texts the world has ever known, the Hebrew Bible. At the heart of Hebrew culture was the idea of a covenant, a binding agreement between a people and their God, not a distant, indifferent deity, but one who cared, who listened, who gave laws and asked for faith. This was a revolutionary idea, that a single invisible God had chosen a people not for conquest, but for righteousness, compassion, and justice. The laws given to Moses, etched according to tradition onto stone tablets atop Mount Sinai, were not just commands, but a moral framework, one that prized dignity, rest, honesty, and care for the poor. The ancient Israelites settled in the land of Canaan and, over generations, established the Kingdom of Israel. Under leaders like Saul, David, and Solomon, the kingdom grew stronger, eventually building the famed temple in Jerusalem, a sacred center where heaven and earth seemed to touch. Imagine its courtyards glowing in the golden light of early morning, the scent of incense in the air, the sound of psalms rising like birdsong through the silence. This was not a monument to power, but to presence, the idea that the divine could dwell among the people, not in thunder or flame, but in stillness. And yet, as with all civilizations, struggle came. The kingdom divided. Foreign empires, Assyrians, Babylonians, Persians, swept through the land. The temple was destroyed, the people exiled. But where others might have vanished, the Hebrews turned inward. In Babylon, they clung to their texts, their prayers, their memory. The scroll became their temple, the Sabbath, their sanctuary. Wherever they went, they carried their identity not in stone, but in story. And this story endured. In time, it would inspire other faiths, Christianity, Islam, each carrying forward the sacred tales, each returning to the quiet hills where it all began. The idea that words could be sacred, that justice could be divine, that a people could be chosen not for dominance, but for devotion, these became pillars of human belief. The ancient Hebrews left behind few grand buildings or empires, but they gave the world something quieter, and perhaps even more lasting, a moral imagination, a vision of time as meaningful, of history as sacred, of human life as something worthy of purpose and hope. So let us rest now, beneath the olive trees. The sun is warm. The scroll is unrolling slowly. The voices of ancestors drift in the wind, soft, steady, filled with longing and wisdom. In this land of prophets and poets, of quiet resistance and enduring faith, time feels slower, and every moment seems to glow. Close your eyes if they are not already closed. Let the psalms settle in your thoughts like birds returning home. Let the stories fold around you like a blanket passed through generations. The journey continues as softly as ever into the next moment of memory. Chapter 13. Persian, Achaemenid. Empire, beneath the wings of Cyrus. Now we drift eastward again to the wide plateaus and golden deserts of ancient Persia, a land where mountains rise like sleeping giants and gardens bloom like poetry between stretches of dry earth. Here, under vast skies and stars that burn quietly in the night, emerged one of the most enlightened and expansive empires the world has ever known, the Achaemenid Empire, founded by Cyrus the Great and carried forward by kings who sought not only power but harmony. The Persians rose in the 6th century BCE from the heart of modern-day Iran, uniting scattered tribes and city-states into a single, sweeping realm. Cyrus, their first great king, was no ordinary conqueror. When he entered Babylon in 539 BCE, he did so not as a destroyer, but as a liberator. He respected local gods, freed the exiled Hebrews, and allowed temples to be restored. His rule was marked by something rare in the ancient world: tolerance. Not weakness, but a careful, graceful strength. His leadership echoed with a quiet principle: that power to endure must respect the people it touches. Under Cyrus and his successors, Cambyses, Darius, and Xerxes, the Persian Empire expanded to touch 3 continents. From the Indus Valley in the east to the shores of the Aegean Sea in the west, from the sands of Egypt to the peaks of the Caucasus, the empire became a living mosaic of languages, beliefs, and landscapes. And yet it held together, not through iron alone, but through innovation. Picture, if you wish, the Royal Road, a highway stretching over 2,500 kilometers, linking Susa to Sardis, guarded by stations, fresh horses, and relay riders. Messages could cross the empire in days. Ideas traveled as swiftly as armies. The world was knit together, not just by conquest, but by connection. At Persepolis, the ceremonial capital, the empire expressed itself not with walls of dominance, but with architecture that welcomed the eye. Great columns rose into the air like trees, their capitals carved with bulls and lions. Stairways were etched with rows of tribute bearers, not bowed in fear, but upright, dignified, carrying gifts from all corners of the realm. The carvings show Medes and Elamites, Babylonians and Lydians, Ethiopians and Greeks. They came not as slaves, but as subjects, diverse, respected, seen. The Persians practiced a religion rooted in light and balance, Zoroastrianism, one of the world's oldest known monotheistic faiths. Its prophet, Zoroaster, spoke of a cosmic struggle between truth and falsehood, order and chaos, Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu. Yet unlike other visions of judgment, Zoroastrianism carried a gentle invitation to choose the good, to speak truth, to act with integrity. Fire was sacred, a symbol of purity, clarity, and wisdom. Temples flickered with its soft light, and the flames burned not in fear, but in reverence. The empire was not without conflict. The Greco-Persian wars brought moments of tension, as city-states like Athens resisted the might of Darius and Xerxes. Yet, even in war, Persian grandeur remained defined not by cruelty, but by scale, vision, and ceremony. Their army was a tapestry of peoples: archers from Scythia, horsemen from Bactria, marines from Egypt. Their wealth flowed not only from conquest, but from systems of taxation, trade, and stewardship. Darius, the great organizer, divided the empire into satrapies, provinces governed by local leaders who answered to the king. Gold and silver coinage helped stabilize the economy. Irrigation systems, qanats, brought water to arid lands. Everything was designed not just to rule, but to endure. There was a calm confidence in their administration, a sense that empire, done wisely, could bring peace. And when the Persian kings walked, they did so with dignity. Their royal inscriptions, often carved into cliffs and palaces, were not only declarations of lineage, but reflections of values. They called themselves King of Kings, not to dominate, but to remind the world of the trust placed in them by the heavens. In time, of course, the Achaemenid Empire would fall. In 330 BCE, Alexander the Great swept through Persia, toppling cities, burning Persepolis, and declaring new rule. But even as the torch passed, the memory of Persia remained, not just in the dust of its stones, but in its ideas, tolerance, infrastructure, order, light. So let us rest now, beneath the broken columns of Persepolis. The wind moves gently through the ruins. The moon rises over the distant hills. Somewhere, the sound of water from an ancient channel still trickles through the dark. This was an empire not just of territory, but of principle, and its echoes remain. Close your eyes if they are not already closed. Let the stillness of the royal gardens wash over you. Let the torch of Cyrus flicker gently in your thoughts. The journey continues, steady and serene, beneath stars that once watched over kings and shepherds alike. Chapter 14. Ancient Greece, Thought, Theatre, and the Acropolis Dream. Now we drift across the sapphire waters of the Aegean, where islands glimmer like scattered pearls, and the wind carries the scent of wild thyme and salt. We arrive in a land of sun-drenched hills, marble cliffs, and olive groves, the land of ancient Greece. Here, beneath clear skies and starlit nights, a civilization unfolded that would shape the soul of the Western world, not through vast empire alone, but through ideas, art, and the pursuit of meaning. The Greeks were many peoples, scattered across rocky peninsulas and clustered islands. There was no single kingdom, no single ruler. Instead, city-states, known as polis, formed the tapestry of Greek life. Athens, Sparta, Corinth, Delphi, Thebes, each with its own laws, traditions, gods, and dreams. Some were ruled by kings, others by councils or assemblies. It was in this diversity that brilliance took root. Close your eyes, if you wish, and picture Athens in the morning. The sun glides over marble columns, casting long shadows down narrow streets. Merchants arrange figs and amphorae in the bustling agora. Philosophers gather beneath olive trees, speaking in calm tones about truth, justice, and the nature of the soul. High above it all stands the Acropolis, crowned with the Parthenon, its white marble gleaming softly against the sky. It is a temple not only to Athena, but to beauty itself, a monument to balance, reason, and reverence. Here in Greece, thought became a kind of art. Socrates asked questions that challenged the mind and unsettled the heart. Plato wrote of ideal forms and eternal truths. Aristotle mapped the logic of the cosmos, charting categories and causes. Their teachings were not dry abstractions. They were alive, woven into daily life, politics, ethics, and education. To think in ancient Greece was to live more fully. The Greeks also gave birth to democracy, a system in which citizens could speak, vote, and decide the fate of their polis. It was limited by class and gender, yes, but it was also revolutionary. In Athens, ordinary men could debate laws and direct armies. Words became tools of power. Persuasion became a civic art. And yet, the Greeks were not only thinkers, they were artists, athletes, and storytellers. Their sculptors captured the human form with grace and clarity. Their architects designed temples that seemed to grow from the earth itself, each column in harmony with the sky. Their poets, like Homer, Sappho, and Pindar, spun words that still ring through time, telling of gods and lovers, of war and longing, of loss and homecoming. In their theatres, carved into the hillsides, Greeks gathered to laugh, weep, and reflect. Plays by Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, and Aristophanes explored fate, guilt, power, and absurdity. Under the open sky, before flickering torches and attentive crowds, the human condition was laid bare. Tragedy and comedy walked hand in hand, two sides of the same eternal coin. The gods of Greece were many: Zeus, Hera, Apollo, Artemis, Athena, Dionysus, and more, each with their own domain, personality, and flaw. They were not distant, but deeply human, passionate, jealous, joyful, and proud. Myths flowed from mountaintops and ocean depths, filling the temples, the festivals, and the dreams of the people. The oracle at Delphi, speaking in riddles, guided kings and wanderers alike. The Olympic Games, held in honor of Zeus, brought together athletes from across the Greek world to compete not for gold, but for glory. And still beneath it all, the Greeks were deeply aware of time's shadow. They believed in arete, or excellence, but also in hubris, the pride that comes before a fall. Their heroes, like Achilles, Odysseus, and Oedipus, were not perfect. They were mortal, flawed, tragic. To be human, they understood, was to live with limits and to find beauty within them. In time, Greece would fall under Macedonian and later Roman rule. But its light did not fade. Its ideas would ripple through centuries, revived in the Renaissance, debated in modern universities, echoed in democratic halls and scientific journals. Philosophy, theatre, mathematics, and ethics all carry the signature of Greece. So let us rest now on a sun-warmed stone overlooking the sea. The cicadas sing, the waves lap gently at the shore. In the distance, the Parthenon still stands, weathered by time, yet filled with grace. The voices of sages and singers drift across the breeze, not demanding, but inviting, not rigid, but radiant. Close your eyes if they are not already closed. Let the weight of questions soften into wonder. Let the stillness of marble and myth cradle your thoughts. The journey continues, calm and curious, through the gentle corridors of time. Chapter 15, Maurya Empire, Ashoka's Path to Peace. Now we journey to the Indian subcontinent, where warm monsoon rains fall gently on emerald rice fields, and banyan trees stretch their ancient limbs toward the sky. Here, amid fertile river valleys and sacred mountains, rose the Maurya Empire, one of the largest and most influential empires in Indian history. Its most powerful ruler, Ashoka the Great, would transform not only his realm, but his very soul, guiding a civilization from conquest to compassion. The Maurya Empire began around 321 BCE, founded by Chandragupta Maurya, who, with the help of his advisor Chanakya, overthrew the Nanda Dynasty and united a vast region under a centralized authority. From his capital at Pataliputra, Chandragupta ruled over a realm that stretched from present-day Afghanistan to the Bay of Bengal, from the Himalayas in the north to the Deccan Plateau in the south. The empire was a marvel of administration, diplomacy, and vision, but it was his grandson, Ashoka, who would leave the deepest mark on history. Close your eyes, if you wish, and imagine Ashoka as a young prince, strong-willed, intelligent, and driven by ambition. When he ascended to the throne, he expanded the empire further still, leading a brutal campaign against the eastern kingdom of Kalinga. The battle was fierce, and though victorious, Ashoka walked among the fallen afterward and was shaken to his core. The suffering, the death, the hollow silence of victory, all of it stirred something deep within him. What followed was one of history's most profound transformations. Ashoka renounced violence and turned to the teachings of Buddhism. He embraced the Dharma, a path of moral law, non-violence, and compassion. He declared that the true conquest was not of lands, but of hearts. And he began a reign unlike any before, guided not by the sword, but by empathy. Ashoka's vision was vast, yet deeply personal. He had pillars and stones carved with edicts, written in the languages of his people, placed across the empire so that all might read his words. These inscriptions spoke of kindness to animals, respect between faiths, honesty, and justice. They encouraged generosity to the poor, care for prisoners, and reflection on one's own actions. His messages were not threats, but gentle teachings, a king whispering wisdom across the land. The empire itself reflected this change. Ashoka supported the spread of Buddhism, not as a demand, but as a gift. He built monasteries and stupas, sent emissaries to foreign courts, and supported Buddhist missions to places as far away as Sri Lanka, Egypt, and Greece. Yet he never forced belief. His edicts explicitly welcomed religious tolerance, urging respect for all paths that sought truth. Imagine now the quiet hush of a stone monastery in the foothills. Monks in saffron robes walk barefoot along garden paths. A bell chimes softly in the distance. Birds call from the trees, and a gentle breeze carries the scent of sandalwood and lotus. This, too, was part of Ashoka's India, a place where inner peace was nurtured as carefully as the fields. Beyond religion, the Maurya Empire excelled in administration and infrastructure. Roads stretched like threads across the land, connecting markets, temples, and cities. Wells and rest houses were built for weary travelers. Bureaucrats kept careful records, collecting taxes and distributing resources. The empire was not just held by force, but by function, a system that worked, serving both king and commoner. Ashoka ruled for nearly 40 years. When he died, his empire slowly began to decline, but the seed he planted endured. His example lived on, in Buddhist texts, in carved stones, and in the memories of those who came after. More than 2,000 years later, the Indian Republic would choose Ashoka's lion emblem as its national symbol, a tribute to a ruler who chose peace over war, wisdom over power. So let us pause now beneath one of his ancient pillars, still standing after all this time. The stone is weathered, but the words remain. The birds sing above us. The wind moves gently through the trees. And the story of Ashoka, the warrior king who became a messenger of peace, still hums softly in the silence. Close your eyes, if they are not already closed. Let his message linger in your thoughts. That greatness can be found not only in conquest, but in kindness, that an empire of the heart may last far longer than one built of stone. And so, our journey continues, calm, reflective, and ever deeper into time. Chapter 16, Carthaginian Civilization, Voyages of Flame and Faith. Now we sail westward, across the glistening Mediterranean, where golden light plays on the waves, and the scent of salt mingles with distant spice. Ahead lies the North African coast, and there, rising from the shore like a mirage of power and mystery, is Carthage, the shining jewel of the Phoenician world, a city of ships and stars, of traders and temples, of fierce devotion and far-reaching vision. Carthage, whose name once echoed with awe and fear, now rests quietly beneath the sands of Tunisia, its memory wrapped in layers of legend and loss. Founded around 814 BCE by Phoenician settlers from Tyre, Carthage was born of the sea. Its founders were skilled navigators, merchants and shipbuilders, and from the very beginning, the city's heartbeat was maritime. The harbour, vast, circular, and ingeniously engineered, became a hub of commerce, where cargo from across the known world flowed in like tides. Gold from Africa, tin from Britain, glass from the Levant, and wine, oil, and grain from countless coasts passed through Carthaginian hands. And with the goods came stories, ideas, and faith. Carthage was not merely a marketplace, it was a culture. The Carthaginians spoke a version of Phoenician, worshipped a pantheon of ancient Semitic gods, and kept detailed records in scrolls, now mostly lost to time. Their most revered deities were Tanit, the goddess of fertility and the moon, and Baal-Hamon, lord of storms and fire. Their temples were places of solemn devotion, built not for show, but for ritual. Fires burned in quiet chambers. Offerings were made in hushed reverence. Their faith was intense, sacred, and deeply rooted in the cycles of life, death, and cosmic order. Close your eyes if you wish, and imagine walking through a Carthaginian street in early morning. The sandstone buildings glow softly in the sun. Merchants prepare their stalls, spices hang in the air, and the distant clang of shipwrights rings faintly from the harbour. You pass under flowering trees, through courtyards where water trickles from carved fountains, and you feel the rhythm of a city in tune with the sea. Every ship that departs carries more than goods. It carries the soul of Carthage. But Carthage was also a military power, especially at sea. Its navy was the most formidable in the western Mediterranean. Sleek warships with rams of bronze patrolled its waters, protecting trade routes and asserting dominance. And on land, its soldiers came from many lands: Libyans, Iberians, Gauls, and mercenaries of all kinds, held together by gold and purpose. The most legendary figure to emerge from this world was Hannibal Barca, a general whose name still lingers in the memory of military genius. During the Second Punic War, in the 3rd century BCE, Hannibal led his army and his elephants across the Alps, launching one of the most daring campaigns in history against the mighty Roman Republic. His victories at Trebia, Trasimene, and Cannae shocked the world. For a moment, it seemed Rome might fall, and yet, in the end, Carthage could not match Rome's growing strength. The war turned, and Carthage, wounded, resilient, endured until the Third Punic War. In 146 BCE, after years of siege, the Romans breached the walls. Carthage was destroyed. Its buildings burned, its libraries lost, its population killed or enslaved. The Romans, it is said, cursed the land, but despite this violence, the memory of Carthage did not vanish. It became a symbol, not only of defiance and power, but of something softer: cultural brilliance, commercial mastery, and spiritual intensity. Today, little remains above ground. The stone blocks of harbours, foundations of temples, a scattering of inscriptions and artifacts. But beneath that silence there is still life. The legacy of Carthage lingers in the way we understand trade, diplomacy, architecture, and endurance. A civilization that valued adaptability, connection, and faith, woven through with mystery, yet unmistakably human. So let us rest now beside the vanished harbour. The waves lap gently at the forgotten shore. The The stars begin to appear, just as they did for Carthaginian sailors charting courses by night. A faint breeze carries the ghost of incense, the hum of distant chants, the soft echo of wooden holes on water. Close your eyes, if they are not already closed. Let the memory of Carthage drift with you like a ship on a quiet sea, steady, storied, and full of wonder. And as always, the journey carries on. Chapter 17. Roman Empire, Marble, Law, and the Murmuring Forum. Now we follow the sun westward again, until it rests above the 7 hills of Rome, a city born of myth, shaped by ambition and remembered in stone. Here, along the banks of the Tiber River, rose a civilization whose name would echo through time with a kind of quiet gravity. Rome, the eternal city, the heart of an empire, and the source of countless roads, words, and laws that still guide us today. At first, Rome was a small settlement, tucked among hills and forests, surrounded by rivals, but its people, the Romans, were steady, practical, and fiercely determined. Over centuries, they built not just a city, but an identity, one that honored discipline, duty, and the slow, steady shaping of order from chaos. From kingdom to republic, and later to empire, Rome expanded outward, not in a single burst, but like a river gradually carving its course through the landscape of the ancient world. Close your eyes, if you wish, and imagine standing in the Forum, the heart of public life in ancient Rome. Marble columns rise into the clear blue sky. Senators in white togas murmur over matters of law and policy. Philosophers gesture softly beneath shady porticos. Traders unload goods from every corner of the empire. Silk from the east, grain from Egypt, amphorae of olive oil from Hispania. There is life here, not loud but constant, a hum of activity, a rhythm of routine, a pulse that stretches far beyond the city walls. The Roman Republic, built on a complex web of checks, balances, and assemblies, introduced ideas that would shape future democracies. But it was also a place of contradiction, where liberty existed alongside inequality, and the voice of the people could be both celebrated and silenced. Still, the Romans treasured their laws, and from them emerged a legal tradition that survives today, with principles of contracts, citizenship, and justice carefully articulated in scrolls and statutes. In time, the Republic would give way to empire. After years of civil war and political unrest, Octavian, adopted son of Julius Caesar, became Augustus, the first emperor. Under his reign, Rome entered a golden age, a time of peace, expansion, and flourishing culture. Roads stretched from the windswept shores of Britannia to the fertile valleys of Syria. Aqueducts carried fresh water into cities. Amphitheaters echoed with music and spectacle. The Pax Romana, a 200-year peace, allowed trade, travel, and ideas to move more freely than ever before. And still, the heart of Rome beat steadily in its architecture, its rituals, its sense of grandeur. The Colosseum, with its towering arches and echoing corridors, became a symbol of spectacle and strength. The Pantheon, its dome still standing today, reminded all who entered that Rome's gods, and its engineers, were vast in vision. Temples to Jupiter, Venus, and Mars rose beside quiet altars to household spirits. The sacred and the civic walked side by side, yet the Romans were not only builders of stone, they were also architects of memory. Through literature, art, and governance, they preserved a vision of humanity as both fragile and noble. The writings of Virgil, Ovid, and Cicero still carry their voices. The stoic calm of Marcus Aurelius, the insights of Seneca, the laughter of Plautus, all remain like soft echoes in a grand hall. Over time, the empire grew too vast, its borders too stretched. Pressures from within and without, invasions, plagues, economic strain, began to wear away at its unity. By the late 5th century CE, the western half of the Roman Empire fell to invading forces, but Rome itself, as an idea, did not die. In the east, the Byzantine Empire continued for centuries more. In the west, kings and scholars preserved Roman customs, language, and law, and through it all, Rome's roads, calendars, alphabets, and philosophies endured, not as relics, but as foundations. So let us rest now in a quiet Roman courtyard. The fountain trickles softly beside worn marble steps. Olive branches sway gently in the afternoon breeze. Somewhere, the notes of a distant flute drift through the air, and beneath our feet, the stones still remember, shaped by sandals, softened by centuries, but never forgotten. Close your eyes if they are not already closed. Let the calm, methodical wisdom of Rome settle in your thoughts. Let the arches and forums and laws drift gently through your imagination like leaves across still water. The journey continues, as measured and steady as the Roman mile. Chapter 18: Han Dynasty, Silk Roads and Scholar Scrolls. Now we travel east once more, across grasslands brushed with silver mist, past winding rivers and silent mountains, to the great heart of ancient China. Here, beneath the watchful skies of the east, rose the Han Dynasty, a dynasty of poets and scholars, inventors and farmers, emperors and emissaries. Lasting over 4 centuries, from 206 BCE to 220 CE, the Han era was one of elegance and endurance, where ideas moved like the wind and silk flowed like water along roads that would link continents. The Han followed the Qin, the dynasty that had first unified China, but where the Qin ruled with a harsh grip, the Han sought balance and order. The founding emperor, Liu Bang, known posthumously as Emperor Gaozu, rose from humble origins and built a realm that prized wisdom, harmony, and continuity. His successors, especially Emperor Wu, expanded the empire's borders, reaching deep into Central Asia, laying the foundations of what we now call the Silk Road, a network not only of trade, but of culture, philosophy, and distant curiosity. Close your eyes if you wish, and imagine a quiet moment in the Han capital of Chang'an. The streets are lined with lanterns glowing gently in the dusk. Oxen pull carts laden with jade and lacquerware. Children chase one another past walls painted with dragons. In the scholars' quarter, a young man leans over a bamboo scroll, dipping his brush into ink, copying the words of Confucius, words that shaped not only the classroom, but the soul. The Han embraced Confucianism as the guiding philosophy of the state, not a religion, but a system of moral order, family duty, and respect for harmony. Officials were chosen not by blood, but by learning through civil service exams that tested knowledge of history, poetry, and virtue. In this way, the Han nurtured a society built not on fear, but on the soft power of education and shared values. Science and innovation bloomed gently in this environment. Han astronomers charted the stars and predicted eclipses. Mathematicians developed complex calculations and early geometry. Medical texts explored the movement of the body's energy, the shui, and described herbs still used in traditional practice. Craftsmen created delicate ceramics and bronze mirrors that caught not only reflections, but entire stories of elegance and ritual. And beneath the hands of unknown inventors, paper emerged, first rough and fibrous, later smooth and strong, replacing heavier bamboo and silk for writing and changing the world forever. but it was the Silk Road that breathed across the empire's skin like a soft wind. Traders and diplomats, monks and travelers journeyed westward, carrying not just silk, but stories, tales of distant lands, strange foods, unusual beliefs. In return, horses, glass, spices, and ideas flowed into China. Buddhism too arrived along these paths, whispered first by travelers from India, then studied by monks in candlelit temples nestled in mountain passes. The Han military held the borders with calm strength. The Great Wall was extended and fortified. Garrisons dotted the frontier. Yet even at the edge of empire, there was a sense of reach without rupture. Diplomacy often balanced warfare, and tribute travelled as frequently as arms. And within the cities, daily life hummed like a quiet string. Farmers tended the rice and millet fields. Weavers worked at looms. Nobles recited verses under moonlight. Children played beside ponds filled with lotus flowers and golden carp. Festivals brought laughter, music, and fireworks to the night sky, soft, transient bursts of joy. Yet time, as always, moved gently toward change. Over the centuries, court intrigues and natural disasters weakened the dynasty. Corruption grew like a shadow. The Yellow Turban Rebellion swelled from unrest. In 220 CE, the Han Dynasty came to an end, dividing into kingdoms, but its legacy, like the silk it once carried, continued to flutter through history, light, enduring, and rich with colour. Let us rest now beneath the paper lanterns of a Han garden. The scent of jasmine and tea fills the air. The scrolls have been put away for the night. A scholar hums a quiet tune as he walks home under the stars. His footsteps soft on the stone path. Close your eyes if they are not already closed. Let the wisdom of the Han wash over you like warm light through rice paper. Let the threads of silk, the brush of ink, and the hush of candlelit halls settle gently in your thoughts. The journey flows on, down calm roads and through golden dynasties, ever onward. Chapter 19. Axumite Kingdom, Axum, Crossroads of Calm. Now we drift to the Horn of Africa, where red earth meets green hills, and the highlands rise like sleeping guardians above the plains. Here, among the whispering acacia trees and cloud-kissed peaks of what is now northern Ethiopia and Eritrea, flourished a kingdom little known to many, yet once counted among the world's great powers, the Kingdom of Axum. A place of gentle faith, intricate trade, and quiet strength, Axum was a beacon of civilization from the 1st century CE until nearly 1,000 years later. Close your eyes if you wish, and imagine the city of Axum as it might have once stood. Stone streets winding through the hills, incense rising from household shrines, the murmur of markets where traders speak in many tongues, Greek, Gaze, Sabaean, their hands exchanging gold, ivory, frankincense, and silk. Nearby, towering stelae, giant stone obelisks, pierce the sky like eternal sentinels, carved with windows and doors to honor the dead and guide their spirits. These are not monuments of empire alone, but sacred markers of memory, still standing in solemn elegance. Axum's power flowed not from conquest, but from connection. Perfectly positioned between the Mediterranean, the Red Sea, and the Indian Ocean, it became a crossroads of trade, where east met west and north met south. Goods passed through its ports at Adulis, carried on ships guided by stars and monsoon winds. From Rome to India, from Byzantium to Arabia, the world moved through Axum. And in return, Axum absorbed more than wealth. It gathered ideas, art, and belief, blending them gently into something distinctly its own. One of the most profound legacies of Axum was its early embrace of Christianity. In the 4th century CE, During the reign of King Ezana, the kingdom officially adopted the faith, making it one of the first great empires to do so. Churches were built of stone, not wood. Crosses were carved into walls and coins, and in quiet sanctuaries, prayers rose in the ancient Ge'ez language, still preserved in liturgy to this day. Yet Aksum's Christianity was never a tool of force. It spread through kindness, ritual, and the soft guidance of monks and kings who saw in the gospel a call to humility and peace. In the cool shaded interiors of Axumite churches, flickering candles still illuminate walls painted with saints and symbols. The air smells of myrrh and beeswax. The rhythm of chants echoes like the heartbeat of history. And though empires elsewhere might crumble with time, Aksum's spiritual legacy lived on, carried through centuries by the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, untouched by colonization, anchored in the mountains. Beyond its spiritual role, the kingdom was a marvel of early engineering and diplomacy. It minted its own coins, gold, silver, and bronze, bearing both kings and crosses, facilitating international trade, and offering a rare glimpse into its rulers and values. It sent envoys to the Roman and Byzantine courts. It respected the diversity within its reach, allowing Jewish communities, Arabian traders, and African pastoralists to live and work in relative harmony. And always, the land spoke too. The soil was rich, the highlands fertile. Terraces cut into the slopes preserved moisture. Farmers tended teff, barley, and cattle under a sun that blessed more than it burned. In the mornings, mist clung to the hills like a gentle veil. In the evenings, the stars returned, bright and ancient, over homes made of stone and stories passed from elder to child. Like all things, Aksum eventually changed. Climate shifts and the rise of new powers gradually moved the tides of trade. The capital shifted, and Aksum itself grew quieter, but its legacy was never silenced. The churches still sing, the stelae still stand, and the memory of a kingdom built not on war, but on wisdom and faith endures. Let us pause now beneath one of those ancient obelisks, cool in the twilight air. The birds are still, the stones are warm, and the past whispers gently, not in conquest, but in continuity, a soft reminder that greatness often wears the robes of patience, grace, and stillness. Close your eyes if they are not already closed. Let the highlands of Aksum cradle your thoughts. Let the incense, the carved crosses, the quiet trade winds drift through your imagination. The journey continues, ever deeper, ever calmer, through the peaceful corridors of history. Chapter 20. Teotihuacan. Civilization. Pyramids beneath the sunrise. Now we drift westward across oceans and time, into the high valleys of central Mexico, where the thin air is cool and still, and the dawn paints the land in strokes of gold and mist. Here, long before the rise of the Aztecs, a vast and mysterious city once stood. Teotihuacan, the place where gods were born. Its true name is lost to time, but its legacy rises from the earth in massive pyramids, grand avenues, and the silent wisdom of stone. A city planned with celestial precision, built not for kings, but for the cosmos. Close your eyes if you wish, and imagine approaching Teotihuacan as the first sunlight spills across the landscape. Ahead of you, the Pyramid of the Sun looms, immense, ancient, quiet. Its stone steps rise toward the heavens, catching the early light like a mountain made by hands. Nearby, the Pyramid of the Moon sits at the head of the Avenue of the Dead, flanked by temples, platforms, and faded murals, once alive with crimson, turquoise, and obsidian hues. Though the voices of its people have fallen silent, their vision still stands, symmetrical, spiritual, eternal. At its height, around 100 to 550 CE, Teotihuacan was one of the largest cities in the world, home to perhaps 100,000 people or more. Yet no inscriptions name its rulers, no grand statues declare individual glory. This was a civilization built with anonymity and unity, where power seemed to reside not in the hands of one, but in the structure of the whole. Its buildings aligned with astronomical events, solstices, equinoxes, the movements of Venus, suggesting a worldview shaped by both the sky above and the sacred earth below. The people of Teotihuacan crafted beauty in every form. They were skilled artisans, shaping obsidian into blades, mirrors, and tools so sharp they could divide light. They painted their homes with gods, jaguars, serpents, and celestial signs. Their ceramic figures, delicate and expressive, reveal both ritual and everyday life. Dancers, priests, warriors, mothers. Their artistry spoke in silence, in clay and color, preserved in the hush of buried chambers. Beneath the city, long tunnels and caverns were carved, places of initiation, perhaps, or origin myths made tangible in stone. Offerings of shells, crystals, and figurines were placed with care, as if to harmonize the seen and unseen worlds. Some believe these chambers echoed the sacred cave, where the fifth son of Mesoamerican mythology was born, a cosmic center linking past, present, and what lies beyond. Teotihuacan was also a hub of trade and culture. Its influence spread across Mesoamerica. We find Teotihuacan-style pottery in distant Maya cities. We see its gods, particularly the feathered serpent, Quetzalcoatl, appear in temples far to the south. Its obsidian blades traveled great distances, as did its ideas. Though the people left few written records, their architecture and iconography became a visual language understood across cultures. And yet, like many great cities, Teotihuacan's time would pass. By the 7th century, the city was in decline. Buildings were abandoned, fires blackened temple walls. The reasons remain uncertain: drought, internal unrest, or perhaps the quiet erosion of the delicate balance that held it all together. But even as its population faded, its memory endured. Later civilizations, the Toltecs, the Aztecs, would come upon its ruins in awe, naming it the birthplace of gods, a place beyond human making. Let us now sit at the base of the Pyramid of the Moon, beneath the violet sky of twilight. The stones are cool beneath our hands. The wind moves softly through the dry grass. There are no crowds, no voices, only the weight of time and the gentle hush of knowing we walk where others once gazed upward in reverence. The Avenue of the Dead is quiet now, but it was once alive with ritual and rhythm, with footsteps, firelight, and sacred song. Let the pyramids rise in your thoughts like silent dreams, built not to conquer, but to connect, earth to sky, people to stars. Let the deep mystery of Teotihuacan lull you into stillness, like sunrise warming ancient stone. The journey continues, quietly, curiously, through the soft shadows of time. Chapter 21: Byzantine Empire, Mosaics, Myrrh, and the Last Light of Rome. Now we cross the threshold between antiquity and the Middle Ages, where the flickering flame of the Roman world did not vanish, but shifted, shimmered, and settled in the east. There, across the Bosporus Strait, stood Constantinople, a city of domes and incense, of golden mosaics and sacred chants. At its heart lived the Byzantine Empire, the continuation of Rome, yet something altogether different, older, wiser, more spiritual. It was a place where empire met eternity, and where the walls of time seemed to hum with sacred light. Close your eyes, if you wish, and picture the early morning streets of Constantinople. The mists from the Sea of Marmara drift in low, curling around marble columns and ancient churches. Bells toll softly from high towers. Cloaked figures walk slowly through arcades and archways, their sandals brushing against stone polished by generations. In the distance, the great dome of Hagia Sophia rises into the pale sky like a thought made solid, not a mere building, but a floating miracle of architecture and reverence. The Byzantine Empire began formally in 330 CE, when Emperor Constantine dedicated the city of Byzantium as his new capital, Nova Roma, the New Rome. Over time, it became known simply as Constantinople. When the Western Roman Empire fell in 476 CE, the eastern half remained, governed from this glittering city of saints and soldiers. It was Roman in law, Greek in language, and deeply Christian in soul. The Byzantines saw themselves as the true heirs of Roman glory. Their laws, such as Justinian's Code, preserved ancient Roman principles and spread them across Europe for centuries to come. Their court was filled with ceremony, robes of silk, diadems of gold, and protocols so precise they resembled a sacred dance. Yet beyond this splendor, there was resilience. Despite invasions, plagues, and endless threats, the Byzantine Empire endured for more than 1,000 years, not with brute force, but with adaptability, diplomacy, and faith. Under Emperor Justinian, in the 6th century, the empire reached its zenith. Great cities were rebuilt. Churches rose like forest canopies. And most enduring of all, Hagia Sophia was completed, a marvel of light and space, its dome appearing to float upon golden mosaics of Christ, angels, and saints. Entering it, one did not merely step into a church, but into a vision of heaven rendered in stone and silence. Byzantine art, too, whispered with otherworldly calm. Mosaics glimmered in candlelight, each tiny tile placed with care, reflecting not only light but spiritual order. Icons, images of holy figures, were painted with deep reverence, their eyes seeming to follow the viewer, not with judgment, but with quiet understanding. In monasteries, monks copied ancient texts by hand, preserving the knowledge of Greece, Rome, and the early church. Their ink strokes, made in solitude, echoed like gentle prayers through the centuries. The Byzantine people lived within layers of meaning: political, spiritual, philosophical. Their empire was not just a territory, but a vision of harmony between heaven and earth, of divine order reflected in earthly rule. Even as enemies gathered at the gates, Persians, Arabs, Crusaders, and Ottomans, the Byzantines looked inward, cultivating music, theology, and thought. Yet change is the one companion all empires must eventually welcome. The Fourth Crusade, meant to protect the Christian world, instead sacked Constantinople in 1204, a wound from which the empire never fully recovered. Though the Byzantines reclaimed their city decades later, the twilight had begun. In 1453, after a final fateful siege, Constantinople fell to the Ottoman Turks, and the last light of Rome, a light that had burned for over a millennium, was finally dimmed, but it was not extinguished. The traditions of the Eastern Orthodox Church, the echoes of Byzantine chants, and the glowing icons in candlelit chapels still carry the spirit of this empire. In architecture, law, and the careful preservation of ancient texts, the Byzantine legacy continues, not loudly, but like the quiet pulse of a distant star, steady and enduring. Let us pause now in the quiet courtyard of a forgotten cloister. The stone is cool beneath your hands. The scent of myrrh and beeswax drifts gently through the evening air. A single mosaic tile, glinting in the last rays of light, catches your eye. It is just one among thousands, yet part of a pattern. Intricate, intentional, eternal. Let the chants and domes and glistening tiles of Byzantium rest in your thoughts like soft ripples on a sacred pool. The journey goes on, through calm and shadow, toward the next golden dawn. Chapter 22. Gupta Empire, Golden Threads of Thought and Art. Now we turn east once more, to the Indian subcontinent, where the sacred rivers flow like silk through valleys of green and gold. Here, in the centuries after the fall of Rome, another civilization bloomed in quiet splendor, the Gupta Empire, often called India's Golden Age. From around 320 to 550 CE, this was a time not of conquest or thunder, but of poetry, discovery, and light. A time when knowledge danced with art, and spirituality glowed gently in every carved stone and measured verse. Close your eyes if you wish, and imagine standing beside the Ganges River as the sun rises. The mist lifts slowly from the water. A flute plays softly in the distance. You hear the rhythmic chants of monks, the splash of oars from a wooden boat, the whisper of fabric as a scholar dips his pen in ink. In the cities of Pataliputra and Ujjain, the air is filled with learning. Temples rise with intricate spires, marketplaces hum with color and conversation, and above it all, a gentle sense of curiosity moves like wind through the trees. The Guptas were great patrons of the arts and sciences. They did not merely rule, they nurtured. In their time, Sanskrit literature flourished. Poets like Kalidasa wrote with elegance and depth, their plays and epics weaving together love, loss, nature, and the divine. The stories of the Mahabharata and Ramayana were retold with renewed reverence, their lessons echoing not with fire, but with grace. Philosophy thrived. Both Hindu and Buddhist traditions lived side by side, engaging in quiet dialogue, often in the halls of monastic universities. This was also an age of science. Gupta astronomers studied the stars, tracked eclipses, and developed theories that would resonate through time. It was here that scholars proposed the idea of a round Earth rotating on its axis. Mathematicians devised early forms of algebra, calculated pi, and refined the decimal system. The concept of zero, so simple, so powerful, emerged not as an absence, but as a presence with its own purpose, a quiet revolution in thought. Medicine, too, advanced in thoughtful ways. Ancient texts like the Sushruta Samhita detailed surgical procedures, herbal remedies, and holistic care that considered both body and spirit. Doctors listened, observed, and treated with compassion. The goal was not domination of illness, but harmony of self, a belief that balance could restore what was broken. Religion and art moved together like melody and rhythm. The Guptas built temples that were not merely places of worship, but expressions of cosmic design. Carvings adorned their walls. Gods, dancers, animals, and geometric forms, each one placed with careful intent. The devotion here was quiet, tender, and contemplative. Buddhist stupas, Hindu shrines, and sacred sculptures in cave temples like Ajanta spoke in the language of silence and light. The empire itself was stable, but not oppressive. Local rulers often governed their regions under Gupta sovereignty, allowing a delicate balance of order and freedom. Roads and trade routes were maintained, connecting India to Central Asia, China, and the Mediterranean. With trade came ideas, silk, spices, art, and philosophy moved across the land like golden threads, weaving cultures together without force. And yet, like all golden ages, the Gupta era was not eternal. In time, external invasions and internal strains weakened the empire. The political structure gave way, but the glow of its achievements endured. The knowledge, art, and spirit cultivated during this time continued to influence generations to come, carried in manuscripts, in memory, in song. Let us now rest beneath the flowering tree of a Gupta courtyard. The sun is low. A gentle breeze stirs the lotus pond. Somewhere, a student recites a verse from Kalidasa, slow, deliberate, serene. The temple bells ring softly in the distance, not calling, but calming. Close your eyes, if they are not already closed. Let the golden light of Gupta wisdom warm your thoughts like a slow sunrise. Let its threads of thought and art wrap gently around your imagination, like silk upon the skin. The journey carries on through balance, beauty, and the hush of ancient understanding. Chapter 23. Maya Civilization, Timekeepers of the Forest Sky. Now, we move once more across the oceans, deep into the emerald jungles of Central America, where stone cities once rose from the forest floor, like dreams carved into reality. Here lived the Maya, a civilization that gazed upward toward the heavens even as it studied the mysteries of Earth. From as early as 2000 BCE, and especially during their peak between 250 and 900 CE, the Maya were architects of time, weaving mathematics, astronomy, language, and myth into a world that pulsed with rhythm, meaning, and grace. Close your eyes if you wish, and imagine walking a jungle path as dawn breaks through the canopy. The calls of birds echo through the trees. Leaves glisten with dew, and then, through a clearing, you see it, a stepped pyramid, worn by centuries, yet still standing. Atop it, a small temple touches the sky. You are in Tikal, or Palanque, or Copan, names whispered across centuries, cities once alive with dancers, priests, astronomers, and scribes. The Maya did not build empires as others did. Their cities were independent, connected more by culture and belief than by kings or armies. Yet across these great centers spread a shared language of symbols, numbers, and stories. The Maya script, the most sophisticated writing system of the pre-Columbian Americas, allowed them to record dynasties, dreams, and celestial events with astonishing precision. Glyphs carved into stelae and painted onto codices revealed not only who ruled, but when the stars would move, when the rains would come, and when time itself would turn a sacred corner. Time was not a straight line to the Maya. It was a wheel, a cycle, a breathing entity. They created calendars so refined they could predict eclipses and planetary alignments centuries in advance. The long count, Tzolk'in, and Cha'ab calendars worked together like gears, marking sacred days, agricultural rhythms, and cosmic patterns with mathematical grace. For the Maya, to understand time was to understand the universe, not just to measure it, but to live in harmony with its flow. They were also builders of beauty. Temples, ball courts, observatories, and ceremonial platforms rose from the forest, aligned with solstices and equinoxes. The Temple of the Inscriptions in Palanque holds not only the tomb of a king, but the dreams of a people, walls filled with cosmic imagery and visions of the afterlife. The city of Chichen Itza, with its feathered serpent descending at equinox, is both an architectural marvel and a celebration of light and shadow. And yet, the Maya were not only mystics, they were farmers, astronomers, engineers, and artists. Their cities thrived with marketplaces, homes, workshops, and schools. They cultivated maize, beans, squash, and cacao with careful techniques. They crafted jewelry from jade, painted vases with mythic scenes, and performed music with drums and flutes that echoed beneath starry skies. Spiritual life was ever present, not distant or dogmatic, but integrated into daily experience. The gods of the sun, moon, rain, maize, and death were not abstractions. They walked beside the Maya in ritual and in dream. Priests interpreted omens, kings performed sacred duties, and the cycles of life and death were celebrated with reverence rather than fear. The ball game, played in grand courts, was more than sport. It was a ritual drama of duality, sacrifice, and cosmic balance. By the late first millennium, many of the great Maya cities began to fall silent. The reasons are still debated: drought, deforestation, internal conflict, but the jungle slowly reclaimed the stones. Yet the Maya people themselves did not vanish. Their descendants live on today, speaking Mayan languages, preserving traditions, honoring ancestors. The past did not disappear, it simply changed form, like time itself, flowing in quiet circles. Let us rest now beneath the shadow of a Maya temple as twilight settles over the treetops. The jungle is alive with the soft hum of insects, the distant call of howler monkeys, the rustle of leaves in warm evening air. A star appears, then another. The constellations shift, just as the Maya knew they would. Close your eyes if they are not already closed. Let the precision of their calendars, the calm logic of their stars, the poetry of their glyphs, guide your thoughts like a boat on still waters. The forest sleeps, and so may you, wrapped in the rhythm of time. Chapter 24. Sassanid Empire. Gardens, silk, and the fire of identity. Now we drift eastward once again, through the gentle slopes of Persia, where the mountains cast long shadows over plains of pomegranates and roses. Here, between the fading light of Rome and the rising sun of Islam, stood the proud and poetic world of the Sassanid Empire. From 224 to 651 CE, this Persian dynasty flourished as a bridge between ancient and medieval worlds, a land of fire temples and fragrant gardens, of silk and song, of fierce independence wrapped in elegant thought. Close your eyes, if you wish, and imagine the palace of Ctesiphon, its great arch soaring above the Tigris River. Traders arrive with bolts of Chinese silk, Roman glass, and Indian spices. The scent of saffron drifts from kitchens. In a shaded garden, poets recite verses beside flowing canals, and just beyond, in the sacred fire temples, flames flicker eternally, symbols of divine presence, of truth kept alive, glowing quietly against the winds of time. The Sassanids saw themselves not merely as rulers, but as guardians of Persian heritage, reviving the glory of the Achaemenid kings of old. Their empire stretched from the Euphrates to the Indus, from the Caucasus to the Arabian desert. Yet it was not built only on conquest. It was shaped by identity, by language, religion, and art that honored their past while guiding their future. At the heart of their spiritual world stood Zoroastrianism, one of the world's oldest monotheistic faiths. It spoke of a cosmic struggle between light and darkness, truth and deceit. Yet unlike thunderous religions of judgment, Zoroastrianism carried a quiet dignity. Followers tended sacred fires in temples and homes, not as idols, but as symbols of wisdom and purity. The eternal flame was not meant to terrify, but to illuminate, a warmth in the stillness, a reminder that each individual choice matters. The Sassanid kings, known as Shahanshahs, kings of kings, ruled with majesty and care. Their courts welcomed philosophers, scientists, and physicians from across the known world. They preserved and translated ancient Greek, Indian, and Babylonian texts, creating libraries of light in a time often remembered for its darkness. Music too played a central role. Royal orchestras and composers crafted melodies said to mirror the seasons, the stars, and the heart's emotions. Architecture under the Sassanids blended strength and serenity. Palaces rose with grand domes, vaulted halls, and intricate reliefs carved into stone. These carvings told stories not just of victory, but of ceremony, courtly grace, and divine blessing. Their love for symmetry and water led to the creation of Persian gardens, designed to reflect paradise, enclosed spaces where every element, from shade to scent, from sound to stillness, was in harmonious balance. Their economy thrived on trade. The Silk Road passed through Sassanid lands, bringing with it not only goods, but tales, languages, and beliefs. Yet they guarded their independence fiercely, often clashing with Rome and later Byzantium in long and complex conflicts. Even in war, their identity remained intact, a flame unyielding, a culture deeply rooted. And yet, in time, winds of change blew strong. In the 7th century, the rising forces of Islam reached Persia's borders. The final Sassanid king, Yazdegerd III, fled deeper into the land as the empire slowly dissolved. The fire temples dimmed, the palaces fell silent. But the Persian spirit, resilient and poetic, did not fade. It found new life in the Islamic Golden Age, in poetry, in language, and in gardens still blooming with quiet purpose. Let us pause now beneath a pomegranate tree beside a gentle canal. The air is warm, filled with the scent of mint and rosewater. A lute plays softly in the distance. The flame still burns, not in stone temples perhaps, but in memory, in the verses of Hafez, in the curve of a dome, in the hush of a starlit courtyard. Close your eyes if they are not already closed. Let the silk of Persia wrap softly around your thoughts. Let the gardens, the poetry, the ancient flame guide you gently to rest. The journey flows on, past empires and echoes, through stillness and story. Chapter 25. Islamic Caliphates, Stars, Scholars, and the Golden Thread of Knowledge. Now, let us journey into a world of minarets and manuscripts, where calligraphy flowed like water and knowledge shimmered like starlight. From the sands of Arabia to the banks of the Tigris and beyond, the Islamic Caliphates rose not merely as empires, but as caretakers of wisdom, explorers of science, and weavers of beauty. Between the 7th and 13th centuries, under the Umayyad and Abbasid Caliphates, a golden age unfurled quietly across cities such as Damascus, Baghdad, and Cordoba, an era of learning, harmony, and thoughtfulness that echoed far beyond its time. Close your eyes if you wish, and imagine the calm streets of Baghdad during its zenith. It is evening. The air is warm and perfumed with jasmine. Lamps flicker in quiet courtyards. Beneath the arches of the House of Wisdom, scholars sit cross-legged among scrolls and stars, translating texts from Greek, Persian, Sanskrit, and Syriac. Equations are whispered with reverence. Astronomers peer upward from rooftops. Words and numbers, art and faith blend into something deeply serene. A world that studies not to conquer, but to understand. Founded in the wake of the Prophet Muhammad's passing in 632 CE, the Islamic Caliphate spread rapidly, not only by the sword, as is often misunderstood, but through trade, dialogue, and adaptation. From the deserts of North Africa to the hills of Spain, from the Indus River to the steppes of Central Asia, the Umayyad Caliphate and later the Abbasids created bridges between cultures, between past and future, between the sacred and the scientific. In this age, science was an act of devotion. Astronomy, medicine, mathematics, and philosophy flourished under the belief that to know the world was to honor the Creator. Al-Khwarizmi, the father of algebra, wrote formulas that still underpin our calculations. Ibn Sina, or Avicenna, compiled the Canon of Medicine, a text so advanced it would guide doctors in Europe for centuries. Al-Haytham studied optics, observing how light moved and bent, how sight was formed not by the eye alone, but by the mind's understanding. These were not isolated thinkers, but parts of a vast and humming constellation of inquiry. Architecture, too, became a form of contemplation. In Cordoba, intricate arches and golden mosaics whispered of divine symmetry. In Samarkand, blue tiles caught the sky in 1,000 mirrored fragments. In Jerusalem, the dome of the rock rose not in defiance, but in reverence, its golden crown shining with gentle strength, its calligraphy reminding the faithful of the oneness behind all things. Language blossomed like a garden. Arabic became the vessel not only of faith, but of knowledge and literature. Poets like Rumi and Al-Mutanabi sang of love, longing, and the ineffable. Historians recorded the rise and fall of dynasties not with cold distance, but with a deep sense of interconnectedness. Even theology was explored with the tools of logic and reason, reflecting a profound commitment to intellectual and spiritual harmony. And always, there was the sky. The stars were studied not only for navigation or prayer, but for what they revealed about time, creation, and the unseen. Observatories were built in Baghdad, Toledo, and Marageh. Celestial spheres turned above astrolabes and maps. The night became a teacher, quiet and patient, offering its light to those who listened. Yet as with all golden ages, shadows eventually lengthened. Political divisions, invasions, and shifting powers slowly dimmed the brilliance. The Mongol sack of Baghdad in 1258 marked a painful rupture as libraries burned and knowledge scattered. But the legacy endured. The ideas seeded during this age took root in Europe, fueling the Renaissance, guiding the Enlightenment, whispering through telescopes and algorithms to this day. Let us pause now beneath the stars of an old Islamic courtyard. The fountain murmurs softly. The tiled walls glow in lamplight. Somewhere, the call to prayer fades into the hush of night. There is peace here, the kind born not of silence alone, but of understanding. Close your eyes, if they are not already closed. Let the stars, the numbers, the gentle words of scholars long gone soothe your thoughts. Let the golden thread of knowledge weave gently through your rest, connecting ages, people, and dreams. Chapter 26. Tang Dynasty. Poetry, porcelain, and the glow of golden lanterns. Now let us journey eastward once more, across green mountains and winding rivers, to a time when China bathed in golden light. From 618 to 907 CE, the Tang Dynasty presided over a world of extraordinary beauty and cultural brilliance. It was an era when poets wandered under moonlit skies, when the streets of Chang'an pulsed with silk and song, and when the distant edges of the known world seemed to draw just a little closer. The Tang era was not merely a time of power. It was a time of balance, elegance, and luminous thought. Imagine the gentle bustle of Chang'an, the Tang capital. One of the largest cities in the world, it sits like a jewel cradled by mountains. The morning air is cool and scented with plum blossoms. Horses trot quietly past lacquered gates. In the marketplace, Persian merchants trade bright textiles, while Buddhist monks chant softly nearby. Lanterns swing gently in doorways, catching the sunlight like golden leaves. This is a crossroads of cultures, faiths, and dreams, a city that listens as much as it speaks. The Tang Dynasty brought peace and prosperity to a vast realm stretching from the Korean peninsula to the borders of Persia. But what made it truly golden was not conquest or wealth, but the spirit of openness. Tang rulers welcomed ideas from across the Silk Road, Buddhism from India, astronomy from Persia, music from Central Asia. Instead of closing their gates, they widened them, and through them flowed the languages, rhythms, and colors of the world. This openness flowered into an age of art and intellect. Tang poets are among the most revered in all of Chinese history. Li Bai, with his wandering spirit, wrote verses like water spilling over stone, spontaneous, luminous, touched with starlight. Du Fu, more measured, wove quiet reflections on sorrow, war, and the fragile grace of life. Their poems were not merely words, but mirrors of the heart, passed from friend to friend, read under lantern glow, or chanted across rivers by drifting boats. Porcelain became an emblem of Tang refinement, glazed in celadon and cobalt, shaped with exquisite care. These ceramics shimmered with the calm precision of their makers. Painters, too, captured the beauty of nature with ink and brush. Mountains rising from mist, birds in quiet flight, bamboo swaying in silence. In their strokes, one finds not just form, but feeling. Religion and philosophy coexisted in gentle harmony. Confucian ideals shaped governance, Taoist principles guided personal reflection, and Buddhism blossomed into majestic temples and profound teachings. Pilgrims traveled to India and back again, carrying sacred texts and vivid stories. Carved deep into the cliffs at Longmen and Mogao, countless Buddhas sit in stillness, eyes half closed, as if dreaming with the ages. Technology and infrastructure flourished as well. Roads, canals, and bridges were built or improved, connecting distant regions. The Grand Canal linked north and south, while the Silk Road stretched westward through deserts and oases, guiding caravans across half a continent. The empire pulsed like a great heart, steady, vibrant, enduring. And in every corner of life, music played. Strings, flutes, and drums sang through palace halls and village squares. Dances flowed with scarves and silk sleeves. Even official ceremonies carried melodies, making politics feel almost like poetry. Art was not a luxury, it was the very air one breathed. But even the brightest lantern dims. In the 9th century, internal rebellions and external threats frayed the edges of Tang stability. The once open capital began to close in on itself. Chang'an's wide streets emptied, and its golden glow softened into memory. By 907, the dynasty had fallen, not in a blaze, but like a poem ending with a final wistful line. Let us rest now in the courtyard of a Tang poet just after dusk. The paper lanterns are lit. A teacup warms your hands. The hush between verses holds more meaning than words can carry. Above, the stars return, just as they did for Li Bai, just as they do for us. Let the porcelain, the poetry, and the soft music of the Tang era cradle your thoughts. Let its lanterns glow gently in your mind, guiding you ever onward through time's calm embrace. Chapter 27. Viking Civilization. Frost and flame on the northern wind. Now, let us follow the northern wind, across icy fjords and shadowed seas, to a land carved by glaciers and lit by flame. From the late 8th to the 11th century, the Vikings stirred, seafarers from Scandinavia, whose ships sliced through fog and salt spray, whose stories were carried not just by conquest, but by song. Though often remembered for their raids, the Viking world was far more than steel and storm. It was a realm of myth, of quiet craftsmanship, of firelight flickering in wooden halls, while voices told tales that shaped the soul. Picture a longhouse nestled beside a fjord. The mountains loom in the distance, wrapped in cloud. Inside, warmth glows from a central hearth. Shields hang on the walls. A carved post creaks softly in the wind. Children gather close as an elder begins to speak. Of Odin and Thor, of Yggdrasil, the world tree, of runes that hold secret meanings. Outside, the sky shimmers with northern lights, weaving colours through the silence like gods at play. The Viking world was shaped by the rhythm of the seasons. Harsh winters called for patience and skill. Summers brought trade, travel, and sometimes war. From the coasts of Norway, Denmark, and Sweden, Viking ships ventured far, to the British Isles, to France, to the icy rivers of Russia, and even across the vast Atlantic to Greenland and Vineland, the edge of the Americas. Their ships, swift and shallow-keeled, moved like shadows across the water, not always to destroy, but often to explore, settle, and exchange. They were traders as much as warriors. In markets from Dublin to Constantinople, Viking merchants exchanged furs, amber, iron, and honey for silk, spices, and silver. Their towns, like Hedeby, Birka, and Jorvik, pulsed with commerce, craftsmanship, and the quiet hum of many tongues. Coins from as far as Baghdad have been found in Scandinavian soil, whispering of a world more connected than it may seem. And within their homes, there was care and culture. Vikings wove textiles, carved wood and bone, forged tools with care. Their art was intricate, knotwork twisting like vines, dragon heads grinning from ships and doorways. Their sagas, passed from voice to voice, preserve not only history but emotion, longing, courage, fate, and honor. They spoke of love and loss with a blunt tenderness, grounded in the land and sea that raised them. Their gods, too, were reflections of this world. Norse mythology was not peaceful, but it was poetic. The gods laughed, fought, failed, and rose again. Ragnarök, the end of all things, was not something to fear. It was inevitable, and therefore accepted. Life was to be lived boldly, yet thoughtfully. Every deed mattered, every choice echoed beyond itself. Over time, the Viking world changed. As Christianity spread through Europe, so too did it reach the north. By the 11th century, the old gods grew quieter. Wooden temples gave way to stone churches. Viking kingdoms emerged, more settled, more structured, but the spirit remained, wild and wandering, shaped by fjords and frost. Let us rest now by the side of a quiet northern shore. The stars wheel slowly above, reflected in the dark waters. A longship lies moored, its sail furled, its dragon prow silent beneath the moon. Somewhere inland, a storyteller speaks the last words of a saga, and the fire sighs low. Let the snow-covered mountains, the whispering runes, and the rhythm of the sea carry you gently to rest. The frost and flame of the Viking world drift now into stillness, their echoes calm and enduring. Chapter 28. Khmer Empire, Stone Forest of Tranquility. Now we drift into the warm, misty heart of Southeast Asia, where jungle and stone merge in quiet harmony. Here, amid the still waters of lotus ponds and the rustle of tall trees, rose one of the most radiant civilizations the world has ever known, the Khmer Empire. From the 9th to the 15th century, this empire blossomed across what is now Cambodia and beyond, leaving behind a legacy etched not in conquest, but in delicate carvings and silent temples, the most famous of which is Angkor Wat, a sacred mountain in stone, glowing softly at sunrise. Imagine walking along an ancient stone causeway. The air is thick with the scent of rain-soaked earth and frangipani flowers. A temple looms ahead, its towers rising like lotus buds, mirrored in the moat's glassy surface. Morning birds call across the trees. The stones are warm beneath your feet, carved with the gentle hands of long-gone artisans. This is not a place of noise or power. It is a forest of stillness, a monument to the rhythm of nature and spirit. At the height of its power, the Khmer Empire stretched across much of mainland Southeast Asia. Yet its capital, Angkor, was the true jewel, a city that rivaled the largest on earth, home to hundreds of temples, vast reservoirs, and ingenious canals. Life pulsed through its markets, gardens, libraries, and shrines. The people built not just to shelter or impress, but to harmonize with the world around them, a balance between water and land, sky and earth, the sacred and the everyday. The Khmer were masterful engineers. They harnessed seasonal monsoon rains to feed a vast irrigation network that allowed for year-round rice cultivation. The Bares, enormous man-made reservoirs, glistened like inland seas, feeding fields and sustaining the city's great population. Their knowledge of water was not just practical, but poetic. Water flowed through their lives, as it did through their art, quiet, constant, sustaining. Their architecture was guided by deep spiritual vision. Hinduism and later Buddhism shaped not just what they built, but how they saw the world. Temples like Angkor Wat, Bayon, and Ta Prohm were not merely shrines. They were sacred maps, cosmic diagrams in stone. Towers symbolized Mount Meru, home of the gods. Moats represented the ocean of creation. Every carving, every statue, every corridor echoed with celestial meaning. Wander through the galleries of Angkor Wat, and you'll see bas-reliefs that stretch like stories, epic battles from the Ramayana, rows of apsaras dancing in eternal grace, scenes of everyday Khmer life carved with affection and care. The beauty here is never loud. It invites reflection. It calls you to listen, not just with the ear, but with the heart. And then there is Bayon, with its many serene faces carved into stone towers. Enigmatic, smiling softly in all directions, as if watching the world with compassion from every angle. Time slows in their presence. The faces are not stern nor lifeless. They breathe quiet joy. They are peace made visible. For centuries, Angkor thrived, a city of light, shadow, and prayer. But over time, the forest grew stronger. Political shifts, environmental changes, and external pressures slowly wore away at the empire's heart. Eventually, the jungle returned. Roots wrapped themselves around temples. Trees grew through roofs. Stones fell, but the spirit did not fade. It only softened like moss over marble. Let us rest now beside a still pool in the ruins of Angkor. The dragonflies hum lazily in the humid air. A lotus blossom opens to the sky. Somewhere, a temple bell rings once, then falls silent. The stones are worn, but they endure. They remember. Let the tranquility of the Khmer world surround you like warm rain. Let the temples, the water, and the whispered wisdom of the jungle cradle your thoughts. In this stone forest of stillness, you are welcome to drift, to wonder, and to rest. Chapter 29, Mongol Empire, Silk Road Serenity. Now, we journey into the open spaces of the earth, vast wind-swept steppes where the horizon stretches endlessly in every direction. Here, under skies that shift from brilliant blue to starlit velvet, arose the Mongol Empire, the largest contiguous land empire the world has ever known. But beyond its reputation for conquest and cavalry, the Mongol world also carried something quieter, something more enduring, a sense of connection. From the Sea of Japan to the shores of the Black Sea, from the forests of Siberia to the mountains of Persia, the Mongol Empire tied the world together with a silk thread, strong, subtle, and surprisingly serene. Imagine the gentle sway of a gyre, a circular tent glowing softly from within. Outside, horses graze under a vast sky. The fire crackles low. A breeze hums through the grasslands, carrying scents of wool, earth, and pine. In the distance, a rider approaches, not with thunder, but with quiet purpose, a messenger on a journey across the breadth of continents. This is a land not of noise, but of movement, of stillness between places, of harmony between man and landscape. The story of the Mongol Empire begins with a single figure, Temujin, later known as Genghis Khan. Born into hardship and uncertainty, he united the warring tribes of the Mongolian steppe with vision, charisma, and ruthless discipline. But while his name conjures images of conquest, it also marks the beginning of something extraordinary, the opening of the Silk Road to safe and steady passage, the merging of cultures once separated by deserts and distrust. The Pax Mongolica, the Mongol peace, allowed scholars, traders, pilgrims, and emissaries to cross Eurasia with unprecedented freedom. Under the protection of Mongol law, ideas moved as freely as spices, textiles, and silver. In Karakorum, the Mongol capital, a marketplace of minds gathered. Buddhists, Christians, Muslims, Taoists, debating, learning, listening. The Mongols themselves adopted what worked best from those they encountered. Persian engineers, Chinese bureaucrats, and Arab astronomers were all welcomed under their rule. Communication was key. The Yam system, a vast relay of postal stations, allowed for messages to travel quickly across immense distances. Couriers on horseback carried documents and scrolls through mountains, forests, and deserts, changing mounts at rest stops like beating hearts across the empire's body. This web of knowledge and logistics became the quiet architecture beneath the Mongol expansion, a structure not of stone, but of trust, speed, and discipline. And even amidst their military precision, the Mongols maintained a deep connection to nature. Their nomadic lifestyle required balance with the land, not conquering it, but moving with its seasons. They lived lightly upon the earth, leaving few permanent marks. Their faith, often centered around Tengri, the eternal blue sky, was not about dominance but harmony, a reverence for the forces that shape wind, storm, and spirit. Over time, the empire splintered into khanates, each with its own rhythm. Some, like the Ilkhanate in Persia, became patrons of the arts and sciences. Others, like the Yuan dynasty in China under Kublai Khan, fostered incredible cultural exchanges and administrative reforms. The echo of Mongol influence lingered long after their empire faded, in trade networks, in architecture, in the very idea that East and West might not be so far apart after all. Let us now rest beside a slow-moving caravan along the ancient Silk Road. The sun dips low behind distant dunes. A camel kneels, and bells chime softly. Traders share stories in hushed tones. Above, the stars brighten one by one, as they did for travelers 1,000 years ago, steady, familiar, guiding. Let the rhythm of hooves, the whisper of silk, and the open breath of the steppes carry you into stillness. The empire is gone, but its calm connection endures. A quiet thread woven through history, linking hearts across time and space. Chapter 30. Inca Empire, Andean echoes and stone horizons. Now we rise gently into the clouds, into a world of mountains that touch the sky. High above sea level, nestled in the spine of the Andes, flourished a civilization shaped by stone, silence, and sun. The Inca Empire, which emerged in the early 15th century and lasted until the Spanish arrived in the 1530s, was the largest empire ever seen in the Americas. And yet it moved to a quiet rhythm, guided more by balance and reciprocity than by noise or spectacle. Its roads wound like threads through misty peaks. Its people farmed the sky, and in their world, the land itself was alive. Imagine a trail leading upward through the sacred valley. Each step lifts you closer to the clouds. Terraces line the hillsides, sculpted with care, holding maize and potatoes as they cling to the mountainside, like green steps to heaven. In the distance, the citadel of Machu Picchu rests gently on a ridge, untouched by time. The stones fit together so precisely that even a blade of grass cannot pass between them. Birds call softly across the valleys, and the wind hums like a song from the earth itself. The Inca called their realm Tawantinsuyu, meaning the four regions, united not by force alone, but by an intricate web of roads, rituals, and relationships. At the heart of the empire stood Cusco, a city designed in the shape of a puma, its streets paved with purpose, its temples glowing with gold. The Temple of the Sun, or Coricancha, shimmered with golden panels that reflected the light of Inti, the sun god, onto walls and offerings. Yet the Incas' relationship with the divine was always grounded in nature. Mountains, rivers, stones, and stars were huacas, sacred beings to be honored, not exploited. Without the wheel, without writing in the traditional sense, the Inca built an empire of stunning efficiency and grace. Their quipu, a system of knotted cords, carried data and memory through color and form. Their shaski, swift-footed messengers, ran across the empire's 40,000 kilometers of roads, passing messages and goods like breath across the high plains. Suspension bridges of woven grass stretched across yawning gorges. Agricultural terraces conserved water and soil. Their empire was not loud, but deeply intelligent. A civilization that listened to the land and learned how to live with it, not above it. Society was built on Aini, the principle of mutual exchange. Farmers, builders, weavers, and rulers worked not for personal wealth, but for the good of the community. Labor was shared. Harvests were stored. The sick and the elderly were cared for. In return, the empire provided food, shelter, and safety. It was a system rooted in reciprocity, not perfection, but care. The Inca were also stargazers. Their calendars were guided by solstices, equinoxes, and the movement of dark constellations seen in the voids of the Milky Way. Their temples and cities aligned with celestial events, reflecting a world both above and below. For them, time flowed in cycles. Death was not an end, but a return. And yet, even the most breathtaking empires are vulnerable to sudden change. With the arrival of the Spanish conquistadors, disease and conquest swept rapidly through the Andes. The last emperor, Atahualpa, was captured. Temples were looted, cities burned, and yet, the soul of the Inca did not vanish. It lives in the Quechua language, still spoken. It breathes in the stones of Machu Picchu, in the terraces that still feed families, in the sky that still turns above sacred peaks. Let us now rest on the steps of a high terrace overlooking the sacred valley. The sun dips low, casting a golden hush across the land. The air is cool and thin. A condor glides silently overhead, and below, the echoes of ancient songs drift upward through time. Let the stillness of the Andes cradle your thoughts. Let the stone horizons, the sacred sky, and the enduring wisdom of the Inca world carry you gently into rest. Chapter 31. Aztec Empire, floating gardens and feathered temples. Now, we journey to a place where the earth seemed to float upon water, where great temples rose like stone blossoms from lakeside cities. In the heart of the Valley of Mexico, surrounded by mountains and mirror-like waters, flourished the mighty Aztec Empire, a civilization both fierce and graceful, bold and deeply spiritual. From the 14th to the early 16th century, the Aztecs built a world where gods and humans met through song, architecture and ritual, and where the capital city of Tenochtitlan shimmered like a jewel upon the surface of a vast lake. Picture a canoe drifting through winding canals. Around you float green chinampas, man-made gardens resting gently on the water, their edges lined with willow trees and flowers. Farmers tend their crops in silence as herons stalk the shallows. Beyond the fields, white stone buildings rise like islands in the morning mist. In the distance, a great temple stands at the heart of the city, its steps leading toward the sky, painted in reds, blues, and golds. You are entering a world where the sacred and the everyday flow together like water. The Aztecs called themselves the Mexica, and they believed they had been chosen to sustain the balance of the cosmos. Their myths told of gods who had sacrificed themselves so that the sun might rise, and so the Aztecs, in turn, offered gifts, flowers, music, incense, and, at times, blood, to keep the world in motion. Though often remembered for the harshness of some rituals, theirs was a civilization also full of colour, craft, and song. At the heart of their empire lay Tenochtitlan, built on an island in Lake Texcoco. Ingeniously engineered, the city boasted aqueducts, canals, wide causeways, and marketplaces teeming with cacao, feathers, jade, and maize. The Templo Mayor, a towering double pyramid, honoured both Tlaloc, the god of rain, and Huitzilopochtli, the god of the sun and war. And in the palace halls, emperors governed with advisors, scribes, and ambassadors, maintaining a complex network of tribute and diplomacy across Mesoamerica. Art flourished here, not only in stone carvings and ceramics, but in codices made of deer hide and bark, painted with vibrant glyphs and symbols. Aztec artisans crafted exquisite featherwork, delicate jewelry, and intricate clothing dyed with colors drawn from insects, plants, and minerals. Poets and philosophers gathered to reflect on the nature of life, time, and death. One of their most treasured sayings was, "We only borrow the earth." In that thought, there is quiet humility, a gentle echo of wisdom. The chinampas, floating garden beds, were a triumph of ecological engineering. Built by layering mud, vegetation, and stakes, they turned shallow lake waters into fertile plots. The result was a sustainable and bountiful source of food: maize, beans, squash, chilies, feeding a growing population with ingenuity and grace. Even here, among the most practical acts of farming, the Aztecs found poetry. They called the maize the sustainer of life, the sacred sibling of the people. Yet, like the morning mist, empires can vanish with startling speed. In 1519, Spanish forces led by Hernán Cortés arrived. By 1521, Tenochtitlan had fallen. Disease, war, and betrayal swept through the empire, leaving its people scattered and its temples in ruins. But the spirit of the Mexica did not end. It lives on in language, in tradition, in the quiet resilience of the descendants who still walk the Valley of Mexico, planting maize, singing prayers, remembering. Let us rest now in a quiet garden where flowers bloom along the water's edge. A flute plays softly in the distance. The wind carries the scent of marigold and smoke. Overhead, clouds drift across a deepening sky, and below, the lake reflects a temple long vanished, still standing in memory. Let the floating gardens cradle your imagination, and the feathered temples stir soft echoes in your dreams. In this world between land and water, myth and memory, we find stillness, and drift gently onward. Chapter 32: Ottoman Empire, Harmony in Diversity. Now, we journey to the meeting point of continents, where east greets west, where minarets rise beside domes, and where languages, prayers, and melodies intertwine like threads in an intricate tapestry. From 1299 to 1922, the Ottoman Empire stood as one of the most enduring and influential civilizations in human history. Yet beyond its borders and battles, beyond sultans and soldiers, the Ottomans created something quietly magnificent, a world of tolerance, refinement, and deeply woven beauty, where cultures did not merely collide, but coexisted. Picture the city of Istanbul in the golden light of dawn, once called Byzantium, once Constantinople, now reborn, where call to prayer drifts across the Bosphorus, and sunlight glints off tiled roofs and domes of blue. The Hagia Sophia, vast and timeless, stands not only as a monument of stone, but as a symbol of continuity, a place where the sacred breath of centuries lingers. The streets hum with soft footsteps, Armenians, Greeks, Turks, Jews, Arabs, all moving together in the rhythm of daily life. The Ottomans, rising from humble Anatolian roots, expanded into a vast empire that touched the edges of Europe, Asia, and Africa. Yet, even as their armies marched and their borders grew, their true strength lay not only in conquest, but in governance, in a delicate system that allowed communities to maintain their identities while contributing to a greater whole. This was the millet system, a structure of inclusion where each faith and people managed their own affairs under the overarching shelter of the empire. In the heart of Ottoman life stood the Topkapi Palace, not merely a seat of power, but a universe of learning, art, and quiet opulence. Here, Ottoman sultans governed with divans of advisors, while court poets recited verses, and artisans painted, wove, and gilded with extraordinary care. The empire valued knowledge as deeply as it did faith. In libraries and observatories, scholars studied stars, translated ancient texts, and kept alive the flame of science in an age of change. Art and architecture flourished. The genius of Mimar Sinan, the empire's master architect, graced the skyline with mosques that seemed to float, domes balanced on light, courtyards echoing with silence. The Suleymaniye Mosque, with its gardens and libraries, was not just a place of prayer, but of peace. And within homes and shops, intricate Iznik tiles, cobalt blue and turquoise, brought the serenity of gardens indoors. Their patterns, looping endlessly, whispered of eternity. Ottoman music was as delicate as lace. Instruments like the oud, ney, and kanun wove soft melodies, carried through palace halls and garden courtyards. Even food became poetry. Spices blended with care, sweets layered like stories, and coffee poured slowly from copper pots, savoured not in haste, but in thoughtful conversation. Though the empire was vast, it was never a monolith. In its cities, cultures mingled. In its provinces, traditions persisted. A church bell could ring within the sound of the call to prayer. A Jewish baker might serve a Muslim family. The empire's strength was not in erasing difference, but in holding space for it, like a garden where many flowers bloom side by side, each adding to the fragrance. But time, ever-changing, brought challenges, internal pressures, shifting alliances, and the rising tide of modern nationalism chipped away at the empire's edges. By the early 20th century, the Ottoman world, once so full of harmony, found itself pulled by forces it could no longer contain. In 1922, the Sultanate was abolished, the empire dissolved, and in its place rose the modern Republic of Turkey. But the echoes of the Ottomans did not vanish. They remain in the mosques and music, the words and recipes, the rhythms of life that still hum softly through the lands they once touched. Let us now rest in a quiet Istanbul courtyard, where grapevines curl over stone walls and a fountain murmurs softly. A book lies open on a wooden bench. The scent of cardamom drifts through the air. The city beyond still stirs, a city of layers, of memory, of peace found in diversity. Let the domes and gardens, the languages and lullabies, rock your thoughts gently to stillness. In the harmony of difference, in the hush of centuries, the Ottoman world invites you to drift, calmly, deeply, onward. Chapter 33, Ming Dynasty, Porcelain Thrones and Ocean Voyages. Now, let us return once more to the east, to a land where dynasties rise like tides, and beauty is crafted with a patience as fine as silk. From 1368 to 1644, the Ming Dynasty reigned over China, a time of restoration, exploration, and radiant refinement. Theirs was a civilization of walls and windows, of ocean voyages and delicate porcelain, of strict order and artistic wonder. And in the stillness between these great endeavors, the Ming world whispered softly of harmony, balance, and the quiet power of returning home. Imagine the forbidden city in the hush of dawn. Its red walls glow gently beneath the early sky. Golden rooftops curve like the wings of cranes, and wide courtyards stretch into the morning mist. Inside, silence is wrapped in ritual. Every doorway, every garment, every motion part of a dance, centuries in the making. The emperor sits at the center of this vast, carefully composed world, not just as ruler, but as the steady heart of the cosmic order. The Ming Dynasty began after the fall of the Mongol-led Yuan Dynasty, with a desire not just to reclaim power, but to restore a sense of cultural identity. Under the Hongwu Emperor and later his successors, Confucian ideals were reasserted. Bureaucracy was refined, the civil service exams reinstated, and agriculture and local governance prioritized. In these rhythms of restoration, the Ming nurtured both order and elegance. Their cities swelled with markets, theaters, scholars, and storytellers. The printing press flourished, and literature bloomed. Books of medicine, poetry, farming, and philosophy found eager hands. In homes and courts alike, there was a return to things well made, from architecture to ceramics, each crafted with deep attention to detail. The blue and white porcelain of the Ming era became renowned across the world, a perfect marriage of earth and fire, discipline and grace. Yet the Ming were not only inward-looking, they cast their gaze outward to the wide blue horizon. Under the command of Zheng He, a Muslim admiral of great presence and wisdom, the Ming launched magnificent voyages across the Indian Ocean. Massive ships, some said to be the largest wooden vessels ever built, carried silk, tea, porcelain, and gifts of state to the ports of Southeast Asia, India, Arabia, and even East Africa. These were not journeys of conquest, but of presence, peaceful missions to show the world the splendor of the Middle Kingdom. And when the great ships returned, the dynasty, like the tide, turned inward once more. The voyages ceased, the walls rose higher. The Great Wall was expanded and fortified, not just as a barrier, but as a symbol of focus, of preservation. In the later Ming period, as challenges grew, natural disasters, court intrigues, and external threats, the empire's calm surface began to ripple. Eventually, in 1644, the dynasty fell to the rising Manchu-led Qing dynasty, and the Ming era quietly ended. But its echoes endure, in the city walls that still stand, in the delicate brushwork of Ming scrolls, in the soft gleam of porcelain bowls passed from hand to hand across generations. The Ming were not defined by a single conquest or innovation, but by a way of being, refined, thoughtful, and rooted in the rhythm of the seasons. Let us now rest in a tranquil scholar's garden, hidden behind tall wooden gates. A willow leans gently over a koi pond. The air smells of jasmine and ink. A zither plays faintly from a distant pavilion. Above, the moon is round, full, watching in silence as it has for thousands of years. Let the balance of stone and water, of brushstroke and breeze, bring stillness to your thoughts. In the Ming Dynasty's world of porcelain thrones and ocean voyages, may you find both grace and rest. Chapter 34. Renaissance, Italy, Light, Learning, and the Rebirth of Wonder. Now we wander into a sun-drenched piazza where shadows stretch gently across cobblestones and voices echo off marble walls. Bells chime from a nearby tower, and the scent of warm bread mingles with the sound of a violin in the distance. We are in Renaissance Italy, a cradle of creativity and intellect, where light filtered through stained glass and canvas alike, where minds reach backward to the ancients and forward into unknown futures. From the 14th to the 17th century, a quiet revolution stirred, not through swords or empires, but through paint, poetry, and the rediscovery of human potential. Picture a frescoed ceiling glowing in candlelight. Artists climb scaffolds with brushes in hand, guided not only by skill but by reverence. Below, scholars pore over ancient scrolls in newly built libraries. In Florence, Venice, Rome, and Milan, the heartbeat of the Renaissance pulsed with a sense of wonder, a rebirth not of a single kingdom, but of ideas, beauty, and belief in what humans might become. At the center of it all stood a renewed fascination with the classical world. Thinkers turned to the works of Plato, Aristotle, and Cicero, not to worship the past, but to learn from it. This was the age of humanism, where the dignity and potential of the individual came into focus, where education, art, and inquiry were seen as sacred acts of honoring the world. And so, across Italy, knowledge flowered, from mathematics and anatomy to poetry and politics. In the workshops of Leonardo da Vinci, invention danced with observation, his notebooks spilled with sketches of flying machines, flowing water, and the intricate workings of the human body. He was not merely a painter or engineer. He was a bridge between worlds, between art and science, between the known and the imagined. And nearby, Michelangelo chiseled human forms from marble with such care that they seemed to breathe, to ache, to dream. The Sistine Chapel ceiling became a sky of stories, where God and Adam reached toward each other, suspended forever in a moment of divine connection. Elsewhere, Galileo Galilei turned his gaze to the stars, refining the telescope and challenging the way humanity viewed its place in the cosmos. With every new discovery, the universe became both larger and more intimate. And in quiet corners of cities, presses clattered, the invention of the printing press spreading knowledge like seeds in the wind. Books found new hands, ideas traveled farther than armies. But the Renaissance was not only for the brilliant few. In lively marketplaces and serene cathedrals, in the weaving of tapestries and the planting of vineyards, the spirit of renewal was everywhere. towns grew proud of their schools and patrons. Wealthy families, like the Medici in Florence, funded cathedrals, universities, and artists with a sense of purpose, not only to glorify themselves, but to shape a world lit by culture and understanding. There were tensions too, between old faith and new thought, between tradition and innovation. But the Renaissance did not seek to destroy the past. It sought to illuminate it, to bring light into dusty rooms, to polish forgotten gems, to say, let us think again, let us feel more deeply, let us see the world not as it is, but as it might be. Let us now rest in a quiet cloister, where ivy climbs across sun-warmed stone, and the sound of turning pages mingles with distant laughter. A painter washes their brushes beside a fountain. A child reads beside a statue. Overhead, the skies are soft Italian blue, full of promise. Let the gentle rebirth of wonder wrap around your thoughts. In the light and learning of Renaissance Italy, may you find inspiration, warmth, and the peace of a mind quietly awakened. Chapter 35. Safavid Empire, Persia in bloom. Now we drift into a garden of light and shadow, where roses bloom beside flowing fountains and domes shimmer in turquoise and gold. We have arrived in the heart of Safavid Persia, a land reborn in beauty and belief. From 1501 to 1736, the Safavid Empire shaped not just politics and religion, but art, architecture, and the very rhythm of life across Iran and beyond. This was a civilization where calligraphy flowed like water, where poetry lived in the breath between words, and where each courtyard, each prayer rug, each mosaic was part of a world carefully and lovingly made. Picture the city of Isfahan at dusk. Lanterns begin to glow along the arched bridges. The Naqsh-e-Jahan Square, vast and hushed, stretches wide beneath the open sky. Horses' hooves echo on the cobblestones, and the scent of rosewater lingers in the air. Around you rise the masterpieces of Safavid design, tall minarets, domes tiled like pieces of heaven, and palaces where silence feels sacred. Here, amid the hum of fountains and the rustle of silk, you walk in a world blooming with peace. The Safavid Empire began with Shah Ismail I, who united Persia and established 12er Shia Islam as the state religion, a decision that would shape Iran's identity for centuries to come. Under his reign, and more fully under his successors like Shah Abbas the Great, Persia flourished as a beacon of unity and splendor. Though born in battle, the empire came into its true grace through culture, tolerance, and the careful cultivation of elegance. Shah Abbas I moved the capital to Isfahan and transformed it into one of the most magnificent cities the world had ever seen. He built with a painter's eye and a poet's heart, commissioning bridges, palaces, gardens, and mosques that still whisper of paradise. The Shah Mosque, with its soaring dome and echoing courtyards, was not simply a place of worship, but a work of living art. Every tile laid with purpose, every calligraphic flourish a prayer in motion. Trade flowed through the empire like a river of silk and saffron. The Silk Road pulsed again with merchants and travelers, weaving Persia into the global fabric of exchange. Caravanserais, roadside inns, offered shelter, tea, and soft beds to those who passed through. From China to Venice, Persian rugs, miniatures, and ceramics were sought after like treasures. But even more precious was the knowledge Persia shared in astronomy, medicine, philosophy, and poetry. For this was also a golden age of words. Rumi, Hafez, Sa'adi, their verses were recited under starlit skies and beside flickering oil lamps. Their poetry was not decoration. It was a way of seeing, of feeling, of understanding life's beauty and sorrow. In the Safavid world, the soul was as important as the sword, reflection was as vital as rule, and in every corner of Persian life, from bazaars to gardens, from madrasas to tea houses, there bloomed a sense of balance, of texture, of care. The famous Persian garden, with its quadrants and water channels, mirrored the paradise described in holy texts, a place of symmetry, serenity, and sacredness. Even death was seen through the lens of poetry. A return, a reunion, a garden path winding inward. As with all empires, time brought change. Internal strife, foreign pressure, and the weight of succession wore on the Safavid state. By the mid-18th century, its golden petals began to fall, yet its fragrance lingers, in domes that catch the sun like mirrors, in verses spoken with a sigh, in the quiet pride of a people whose art continues to bloom. Let us now rest beside a slow fountain in an Isfahani courtyard. The sound of water is steady and soft. Cypress trees sway gently above. A nightingale sings just out of sight, and somewhere nearby, someone begins to recite a line of Hafez. Even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, "You owe me." Let the garden surround you. Let the poetry unfold within you. In the peaceful bloom of Safavid Persia, you are free to drift, to dream, and to simply be. Chapter 36. Spanish Empire. Sun, sea, and the shadow of gold. Now we follow the warm wind across the Atlantic, through the scent of salt and citrus, toward galleons drifting beneath sails of canvas and sky. The age of discovery had arrived, an era of ambition, faith, and far-reaching tides. From 1492 to 1898, the Spanish Empire spread its influence across continents, shaping the modern world with words, weapons, and wonders. But behind the conquistadors and cathedrals, beyond the charts and gold, was also a quieter story. Of language carried across oceans, of music blending in the streets, and of sunlight pouring through stained glass in distant lands. Close your eyes, if you wish, and picture a ship rocking gently on the open sea. The horizon glows with the last light of day. Sailors murmur softly, pointing toward unfamiliar stars. Below deck, barrels creak and ropes sway, while above, seabirds glide like omens. These are the ships of the Spanish crown, venturing westward from Castile and Aragon into the vast unknown, searching for spices, salvation, and something more enduring than gold. The voyage of Christopher Columbus in 1492 marked a beginning, though not for the world, which was already old and complex, but for a new kind of connection between peoples and places. Soon, Spanish explorers reached the Caribbean, the Americas, the Philippines. With them came religion, architecture, law, and language, a culture seeking to plant itself wherever the tide allowed. Cathedrals rose beside pyramids, cloisters bloomed beside palaces, and in many places, the blending of worlds was both beautiful and painful. The Spanish Empire became a global web, its reach spanning from Lima to Manila, from Seville to Mexico City. Silver flowed from the mines of Potosi, carried by mule, ship, and cart, across oceans to fund palaces, armies, and kingdoms. Cities grew where once there had been none, layered with plazas, basilicas, aqueducts, and music that fused local rhythm with European melody. In Spain itself, the Golden Age brought a flowering of art, literature, and reflection. Velázquez painted courtly grace with quiet realism, while Cervantes gave the world Don Quixote, the gentle dreamer who tilted at windmills and asked us all to believe a little more in the impossible. The empire was a paradox, proud and conflicted, devout and hungry, brilliant and flawed. Faith was central. The Spanish carried Catholicism as both solace and structure, building missions, baptizing new believers, and reshaping the spiritual landscape of whole continents. But with faith came conquest. The Aztec and Inca empires fell. Indigenous cultures were upended, and the golden glint of wealth often cast long shadows of sorrow. Yet even within empire, life unfolded in quiet ways. In village squares, flamenco guitars strummed gentle songs. In colonial kitchens, old and new ingredients met in fragrant harmony. In monasteries, monks transcribed knowledge. In bustling ports, African, indigenous, and European voices blended into new dialects. The Spanish world, once scattered and separated, began to hum with shared language and cultural threads. In time, the empire waned. Rebellions rose. Colonies declared independence. The world moved into new chapters. By the end of the 19th century, Spain's imperial twilight had arrived, yet its legacy, complex and enduring, lived on in the languages spoken from Buenos Aires to Barcelona, in the food, the faith, the architecture, and the lullabies sung beneath both Spanish rooftops and Caribbean stars. Let us now rest beneath a lemon tree in a quiet courtyard, the walls painted white and blue. A fountain trickles nearby. Somewhere, a guitar plays low and slow, and the warm scent of orange blossoms drifts through the evening air. Above, the stars wheel silently over the wide, wide sea. Close your eyes, if they are not already closed. Let the tides of time wash gently over you. In the sun, the sea, and the shadow of gold, may you find peace, reflection, and a space to drift softly into dreams. Chapter 37. British Empire, Maps, Machines, and the Measure of Time. Now, we turn our gaze toward an island kingdom where fog curls over rolling hills and clock towers rise above cobbled streets. From modest beginnings, the British Empire expanded until the sun was said never to set upon it. Spanning centuries, from the late 1500s to the twilight of the 20th century, this empire left a deep imprint on the world. But beyond its red-coated soldiers and global maps, it was also a story of discovery and doubt, of invention and contradiction, of steam engines and whispered lullabies drifting across continents. Close your eyes if you wish, and picture a quiet study in Victorian London. The ticking of a clock echoes softly against mahogany shelves, lined with books. Outside, rain taps gently on the glass. A globe turns under a scholar's hand, tracing sea routes and far-off colonies. In this age, knowledge and empire walked hand in hand, drawing borders, charting stars, building railways through jungle and desert alike. The British Empire began with trade, merchant ships laden with wool, tea, spices, and dreams. In ports like Bristol, Liverpool, and London, sailors set out across the Atlantic and Indian Oceans, founding colonies and company outposts. Over time, commerce gave way to conquest. Flags were planted, treaties signed or broken, and territories claimed across North America, the Caribbean, Africa, Asia, and Oceania. But empire was never just a matter of maps. It lived in the rhythms of daily life, in languages blended, in customs shared and reshaped. The Industrial Revolution, which bloomed in Britain in the 18th and 19th centuries, became the engine of empire. Coal-fired locomotives roared through green valleys. Steamships carved paths across oceans. Telegraph lines stitched continents together like thread on a needle. It was a time of astonishing invention, but also of increasing pace, as the empire sought not only to span space, but to measure time. Clocks became symbols of order. Greenwich became the prime meridian. The world, once moved by sun and season, was now synchronized to the ticking of British time. and in cities and towns across the empire, stories unfolded, some triumphant, some tragic. In India, great railways were laid while independence stirred in the hearts of poets and reformers. In Africa, borders were drawn by foreign hands. In Australia and Canada, settlers built new lives on ancient lands. In every colony, there were meetings of culture, often unequal, sometimes enriching, sometimes painful. The British brought law, language, and literature, but they also brought control, extraction, and silence. For every cathedral or university razed, there were voices lost, traditions altered. Yet within the empire's reach, life pulsed quietly, in village markets and schoolhouses, in train stations and tea plantations. Children recited Shakespeare beside native songs, cricket bats thudded against colonial dust, rail lines carried mail, news, and memories. In this mingling of people and paths, new identities emerged, hybrid, complex, and enduring. Back in Britain, the empire lived not only in policy, but in art and imagination. The novels of Dickens, the poems of Kipling, the natural observations of Darwin, and the maps drawn by explorers all shaped the empire's self-image. But change was coming. In the 20th century, wars shook the imperial world, nationalist movements gained strength, and slowly the empire faded, not in a single moment, but in a long exhale. By 1997, when Hong Kong was returned to China, the last major colony was gone. Yet the empire's legacy lives on, in language, legal systems, literature, railways, and relationships both strained and strong. English is spoken in courts and cafes around the world. Tea is sipped in Nairobi and Delhi. And the marks of empire, for better and worse, remain part of our global story. Let us now rest in a quiet English garden. The air is cool and damp. A robin sings from the hedgerow. A copy of Great Expectations rests beside a pot of tea. Nearby, the gentle chime of a grandfather clock marks the hour. Soft and steady. Close your eyes if they are not already closed. Let the ticking fade into your thoughts. In the age of maps and machines, of steam and stars, may you find not noise but calm, a gentle place to breathe, reflect, and drift into restful dreams. Chapter 38, French Empire, Enlightenment and Empire's Embrace. Now we drift to the banks of the River Seine, where lamplight flickers on water and cafes hum with conversation. The scent of warm bread and old paper lingers in the air, and above the rooftops of Paris, stars glimmer like distant ideas waiting to be named. The French Empire, spanning centuries and oceans, was many things, a canvas of revolution and refinement, of conquest and culture, of light and shadow. It was an empire of thought as much as territory, where philosophy met politics, and poetry whispered beneath the thunder of history. Close your eyes, if you wish, and picture a scholar's chamber lit by candlelight. On the desk lie manuscripts of Voltaire, Rousseau, and Montesquieu, their pages alive with questions about liberty, reason, and the rights of humankind. Outside, printing presses thrum, carrying these ideas across Europe and far beyond. This was the Enlightenment, born not in silence, but in the gentle murmur of minds seeking to understand the world and change it. France's imperial journey stretched wide, from the forests of Canada to the coasts of West Africa, from Indochina's rice fields to Caribbean sugar plantations. Ships sailed under fleur-de-lis banners, carrying goods, settlers, and laws. But along with material power, France carried a vision, not always realized, but deeply felt, of a civilizing mission, of spreading its language, its art, its ideals. It was a mission both generous and deeply complex. In the streets of Saint-Domingue, the wealthiest colony in the New World, the The sugar trade thrived, but so too did resistance. There, amid unbearable conditions, the flame of revolution was kindled. Inspired by the very Enlightenment ideals France had championed, Toussaint Louverture led the enslaved to victory, and Haiti became the first Black Republic. It was a moment both luminous and painful, a mirror held to empire, asking it to see itself more clearly. Meanwhile, back in Europe, the French Revolution reshaped not just government, but the very language of power. The cry for liberté, égalité, fraternité echoed far beyond the Bastille, and in the wake of upheaval rose Napoleon Bonaparte, a man of both brilliance and contradiction. Under his rule, the French Empire stretched across much of Europe. He carried the Napoleonic Code, a legal system that would influence nations for centuries, but also brought war and control. His dreams were vast, but time, as always, moved on. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, France expanded further into North and West Africa, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific, creating what became the second largest colonial empire in the world. Cities like Algiers, Saigon, and Dakar pulsed with French language and architecture, even as local cultures persisted, resisted, and adapted. Schools taught French history, churches echoed with French hymns, but beneath the surface, other voices remained, older, wiser, waiting. Yet even in empire, there was beauty. French engineers built railways and canals. Artists sketched sunlit ports. Botanists catalogued the world's plants with reverence. And in quiet classrooms, children in distant lands traced letters that had travelled across oceans. Language became both a bridge and a burden, a gift and a memory. In time, as the world shifted, the empire unravelled. Wars drained strength. Independence movements grew. One by one, colonies claimed freedom, and France stepped back, not without struggle, but with growing awareness. Today, the legacy of the French Empire is written not only in history books, but in the words spoken on every continent, in creoles, in cuisine, in customs that blend Paris with Port-au-Prince, Marseille with Marrakesh. Let us now rest in a peaceful corner of a Parisian garden. Lavender sways in the breeze. A poet leans over a journal. Children play beneath chestnut trees. In the distance, a bell tolls the hour, soft and steady. Above, the sky is soft and wide. The same sky that watched over every corner of the old empire. Close your eyes, if they are not already closed. Let the words of philosophers, the notes of chansons, and the hush of a world both dreamed and remembered lull you into calm. In the embrace of enlightenment and empire, may you find thoughtfulness, balance, and peace. Chapter 39. United States of America. Dreams, divides, and the power of possibility. Now we drift across a vast land of rivers and mountains, of deserts stretching into silence, and forests that whisper with ancient wind. The United States of America is a country born from revolution and restlessness, a young nation shaped by old ideas, and a place where ideals and contradictions have always shared the same breath. From its founding in 1776 to the global stage it now occupies, America's story is one of dreams spoken aloud, sometimes boldly, sometimes softly, and of the enduring belief that tomorrow can always be different from today. Close your eyes, if you wish, and imagine a parchment being signed by candlelight. Quills scratch against paper as words like liberty, pursuit of happiness, and a more perfect union are etched into being. Outside, a humid summer stirs the air. The Declaration of Independence marks not just a break from empire, but a promise to build a nation founded on principles of self-governance, freedom, and opportunity. Yet the truth as ever, would be more complex than the dream. As the 13 colonies grew into states, a constitution was forged, a framework both solid and evolving. But even in its early chapters, the United States wrestled with deep divides between liberty and slavery, inclusion and exclusion, idealism and expansion. The westward frontier beckoned, its promise tempered by the displacement of native peoples, whose own nations had long thrived across the continent. Trains rolled westward, cities climbed skyward, and all the while the land remembered, holding stories deeper than any map. The 19th century was marked by both tragedy and transformation. The Civil War, a rupture at the heart of the nation, brought devastation, but also a reckoning. The end of slavery opened new chapters of struggle and strength for African Americans, whose music, art, and courage would go on to shape the soul of the nation. Meanwhile, immigrants arrived by the millions, stepping off boats with hope in their eyes and memories in their suitcases, contributing their languages, foods, and hands to the American experiment. In the 20th century, America became not just a nation, but a symbol of motion, of industry, of influence. Its industrial revolution powered cities like Detroit and Pittsburgh. Its cultural reach expanded through jazz, cinema, and innovation. The Harlem Renaissance, the Apollo moon landing, the civil rights marches, these moments lit the world with both inspiration and reflection. And in times of global conflict, the United States rose as a military and economic superpower, deeply shaping international events, economies, and alliances. Yet always, there remained tension between what was and what could be. The Great Depression, Vietnam, Watergate, 9/11, and countless moments of protest and reform reminded the country that progress was neither straight nor swift. But still the idea endured that change was possible, that a single voice, a single vote, a single act of kindness might ripple outward and shape the future. Today, the United States is a mosaic of cultures, ideas, and identities, a country of bustling cities and quiet plains, of towering redwoods and deep southern swamps, of debate and diversity. It remains a place where poetry is written on subway walls and where science leaps forward in quiet laboratories, where the flag is not always seen the same way by every hand that holds it, but where, in the end, the dream of unity still hums beneath the noise. Let us now rest on a wooden porch in a small Appalachian town. Fireflies blink lazily in the dusk. A radio plays softly from inside. A child laughs somewhere down the road. Above, the stars shimmer across a broad and open sky, as they once did over Concord, Selma, Stonewall, and countless quiet places that never made the headlines. Close your eyes if they are not already closed. Let the wind carry you across open plains and busy streets. In the dreams and divides of the American story, may you find the quiet power of possibility and the gentle courage to believe in better days. Chapter 40: Modern China, Mountains, Megacities, and the Spirit of Renewal. Now we arrive at the final bend in our long and gentle journey to a land ancient and ever-changing, where mountains still cradle temples and megacities pulse with 1,000,000 footsteps each dawn. Modern China, from 1949 to today, is a story of immense transformation. It is a tale told in whispered prayers and roaring engines, in rice paddies and data servers, in quiet reflection and swift ambition. Through revolution and reform, through memory and momentum, China has re-emerged on the world stage, not as a relic of the past, but as a force of the future. Close your eyes if you wish, and imagine a misty morning along the Yangtze River. A fisherman casts his net from a wooden boat. The hills rise like soft giants, and birds circle slowly above terraced fields. This is a land where ancestors are honored in incense and stone, where tea is poured with intention, and where history does not simply linger, it breathes. In 1949, the People's Republic of China was founded under Mao Zedong, a moment of seismic change. The old imperial order, long collapsed, gave way to a new ideology, one that sought to modernize, industrialize, and unify a vast and diverse country. The decades that followed were turbulent: the Great Leap Forward, the Cultural Revolution, campaigns that aimed to reshape society, but often left deep scars. Yet, through the hardship the country endured, its spirit bending but not breaking. By the late 20th century, the tide began to shift again. Under the leadership of Deng Xiaoping, China opened its doors to the world. Markets awakened, cities expanded. Where once there were small villages, now rose towers of glass and steel. A country that had once turned inward was now racing toward the horizon, building bridges, bullet trains, and a global presence. In the 21st century, China became home to some of the world's largest cities: Shanghai, Beijing, Shenzhen, places where neon reflections shimmer on rain-slicked streets and innovation hums from laptops in sky-high cafes. Yet even as megacities grew, traditions held. The Spring Festival still lights up winter nights. Lanterns still float down rivers. In mountain temples, monks still chant beneath pine trees older than empires. China's modern story is written in both binary code and brushstroke. It leads in technology, in infrastructure, in education. High-speed rail slices through mountains once considered impassable. Satellites whisper to one another high above deserts and deltas. At the same time, ancient poetry is memorized by schoolchildren. Traditional medicine is practiced alongside modern science. And families still gather at dusk to share dumplings and stories passed down like heirlooms. Of course, with rapid growth comes great complexity. Environmental challenges, urban sprawl, questions of freedom and harmony, these too are part of the modern tale. And yet, through each wave of change, China continues to seek renewal, drawing from its deep roots, its philosophical foundations, its ancient resilience. Let us now rest on a quiet balcony in a courtyard home, where red lanterns sway gently in the evening air. A small tea kettle simmers nearby. The scent of jasmine lingers. Beyond the tiled roofs, the mountains fade into the softest blue, a reminder that even in a world of constant motion, stillness remains. Close your eyes, if they are not already closed. Let the rhythm of ancient footsteps and modern dreams lull you to peace. In the spirit of renewal that flows like a river through China's long story, may you find balance, reflection, and the calm of arriving home. And now, dear listener, our journey through the greatest civilizations of all time gently comes to an end. We have wandered candlelit libraries, crossed deserts with caravans, stood beneath pyramids and steeples, beneath domes and open skies. We have followed the whispered hopes and gentle lessons of those who came before, learning not just how they built and ruled, but how they dreamed and how they endured. In their stories, we find not just history, but humanity, echoes of our own questions, our own longings, our own quiet awe. Time, like water, softens even the sharpest stones. And here, in the hush of this moment, you have drifted with time itself. If you found peace in these words, if you felt curiosity warmed by calm, we invite you to like this video and subscribe to Drift Off to History, so you never miss a chance to wander gently through knowledge again. For now, rest easy. Let the echoes fade. The world, in all its wonder, will be here when you wake. Good night.